Good evening, everybody. We'll welcome all members of council and everyone who is watching us on the live stream this evening. We're glad you're here, and we'll call this meeting to order. The second item on the agenda is disclosures of pecuniary interest. Ask any member to declare one of those now, or if you need to. I don't see any at this point. That moves on to additions, deletions, amendments. We don't have any of those. We have no open forum requests this evening, so that moves us on to delegations, and we have 3 delegations, and the first one is from Brian Longmire of the Hospital Foundation Radiothon. And just remind all the delegations, just before we go to Brian, that we have 10 minutes for each delegation, and council's got a significant agenda this evening, so we'll hope everybody can hold to that time. Thank you very much. Brian.
I can keep it to that for sure, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Mayor Charbonneau and the rest of council for giving me time at tonight's council meeting. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all. Feels a little bit weird to be on your turf tonight, as I have spoken to most of you on my broadcast before, but there's no video in my domain. So it is a little bit different. Here we go anyway. I'm here tonight representing not only our town's local radio station, but more importantly, the Saugeen Memorial Hospital Foundation. As I'm sure you know, the foundation is essentially the only source of funding for the equipment that is needed to fill our local hospital so that it will function properly as to meet the healthcare needs of our municipality. The money needed to purchase this, sometimes life-saving equipment, comes almost exclusively from fundraising. And like most organizations that count on fundraising to exist, the Hospital Foundation has had a very difficult year because of the prolonged pandemic. The foundation had to cancel the hugely successful Grand Fondo in 2020, which of course would have raised somewhere in the neighborhood of $200,000. That is money lost to the foundation. COVID-19 also caused the Huron Shores Rotary Run to be done virtually this year. Still, a donation was made, but of course at substantially lower levels than normal. And other events like the Healthcare Gala and Southampton Cruise Nights and others had to be canceled entirely. Even service organizations like our local Rotary clubs, who pledge very large donations to the hospital, have missed running a lot of their normal events like the Home and Rec Show and Food Expo and others. So to say 2020 has been a challenging year for fundraising, well, that's a huge understatement. Currently, the foundation is running their Light the Way campaign, which hopes to raise funds for a much needed and upgraded X-ray imaging machine that will cost a little over $500,000 at the hospital. The current machine's around 15 years old, and in the world of technical healthcare equipment, well, that's a lifetime. Imagine your cell phone being 15 years old, the difference between then and now. The new digital image device will be much more capable of not only detecting bone breaks, which is what we think of when we say X-ray, but it can help diagnose and assess patients with many other things, like even infections like pneumonia. That seems pretty important these days. Some tumors, calcifications like kidney stones, and more. The new unit will also include a portable component that will allow it to be used throughout the hospital, including in our beautiful new emergency room. Here's a fun fact. Did you know that our current imaging machine is available for service 24/7, and the department sees approximately 11,000 visitors per year? 11,000 per year. There's only 365 days. That number absolutely blew me away. There is a huge need for this upgraded equipment. So this is where I come in. A large part of the Light the Way fundraising comes from the 98 The Beach Radiothon, which I'm very happy to say will take place again this year. Although like many things in 2020, it's going to be a little bit different. This will be our 5th year of the Radiothon, and I'm proud to say it's been a huge success ever since our first go around. We sure didn't know what to expect 5 years ago, but in those 4 years that we've ran so far, as it always done, this community has pulled together, and the Radiothon has raised roughly $300,000, $250,000 in 4 years. It really amazes me that a small local radio station and its listening community can make such a difference to local healthcare. On a personal note, I have to say, when Sally Kidson and I first sat down and she suggested we should set our first one-day goal, at $50,000, we all kind of swallowed pretty hard at the station, and we were in a bit of shock, to say the least. And our first radiothon raised $65,000 that day, one day, 12 hours. It still blows me away. Now, back to the reality of this year, which is 2020. This is a year of reinventing ourselves out of necessity. So I am happy to say that the radiothon will go on as scheduled, December 10th, from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. It's live on 98 The Beach FM. It is also streamable on our website. But things will have to be a little bit different. It's not safe to have people attending live to deliver donations or coming in to speak live on the air with our announcers. And we won't have the usual crowds in the building and the party atmosphere. But we are planning to have a fun and productive day nonetheless. And we expect our phone lines to be lighting up, both with pledges and on-air stories that will encourage from dignitaries like yourself, staff at the hospital, users of the hospital, and all sorts of community members. That's what we're expecting. We're going to utilize all available technology to make sure that December 10th is another great day for local healthcare. You may have heard already, we actually have a text to donate number. So that's new for us this year, and that's how technology changes. So we're excited about things like that. So the reason I'm here tonight, I come before council just to ask for your acknowledgement of this very important event, and as a reminder to our community and yourself to put December 10th on your calendars. Tune in, donate, and I ask that you encourage and challenge your friends and acquaintances to do the same. And I hope to hear from each and every one of you on December 10th at the beach for the 2020 Light the Way Radiothon. That's all I have for tonight. I just want to thank you so much for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about this very important day in Saugeen Shores.
Thanks very much, Brian. Are there questions or comments from members of the committee? The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Brian, thanks for your presentation. And that 11,000 number sure stands out, and it's outdated equipment needs to be replaced. And I always look forward to the radiothon every year, and you do a terrific job down there. And Brian, you just keep giving to the community. You're an active force with our Attainable Housing Task Force too, and you do a lot of great work, and all the volunteers do with the hospital. And so I know this community rallies behind projects like this. They've done it many times, and they're going to do it again. And I think your new format, I know with you and others behind it, you'll make it work. So I just want to say big thanks to you and all your volunteers, Brian. You do a fabulous job in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank us, the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I just wanted to echo the comments of the Vice Deputy Mayor. Brian, you and the rest of the committee do a fantastic job. Small towns don't exist without the volunteers that make it happen. And the people in this community rally behind causes, and this is a great cause. So thank you for all that you do. A belated happy birthday from last week, and keep that hometown spirit up.
Thank you. Further comments? Councillor Smith.
Thank you. And I would just like to add, I believe it was our last council meeting that we emphasized the importance of local media. And this is just another example that I see where having a local radio station such as yourself at 98 The Beach is just so important to the community on so many levels, not only from our ability to get news, but from this case where we're able to perpetuate the spirit of giving in the community. So thank you to 98 The Beach and those that continue to perpetuate local news in our community.
Thank you. Are there further comments? Yeah, Councillor Maya.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Brian, I'm a guy that likes to work with deadlines and targets. And well, before I go into that, I'll just say I will really miss dropping by the radio station this year. I always had such a good time popping in and getting a donut and seeing you and John Davinsky and the crew and all of your special guests and all the phone people working so hard. I'm going to really miss that part, but you can count on the fact that we'll be calling in. But with regards to a target, is there a target you're aiming for this year? You mentioned that you went past 65,000 in the first year, and give us something to work towards.
I'm online.
Oop, Brian, you're on mute there,
Brian.
How about
Heard
we
you were
just go
online, though.
ahead and, are you hearing me now?
Yep.
How about we just go ahead and buy that new x-ray machine? What do you think about $510,000? I think that would be a real big ask, and we've been hesitant to set a solid goal this year. Let's say we have one in our head, but we are a little we want to see how it starts going. Yeah, you got it. That's what we're looking for. But it's hard to put that out there. But wouldn't it be great to see $100,000? Last year we did over $80,000. So wouldn't it be fantastic if we could pull together $100,000 this year towards that X-ray machine? It always makes me nervous because I always get on every morning and go, "Is there anybody listening?" And these are Radio On Day is the day we prove that they absolutely are. And I mean, we'd be over the moon if we could see that addition to the Light the Way campaign this year.
You bet. Are there other questions or comments? Well, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if you hit that target, Brian. In fact, I have every confidence that you probably will. So I just want to say thank you to you. And I know all the members of council are probably sending in their messages or coming in to record messages for that day. And so that is good. And, I'll certainly be making a donation, and I'll let you know what that is that day. And I hope all the members of council listen, because I'm expecting that they will either match me or beat me. So we'll see. We'll see. But thanks very much.
Challenge is on.
That's right. Thanks very much, Brian. We appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
So that brings us on to our next delegation, which is from Pat Sanigan from CFUW, here to talk to us about the annual December 6th Vigil. Pat. Hope you're still muted there, Pat. Pat, you're still muted. We can't hear you there, Pat. We need to hit the space bar and get your mute button off. No. Pat can't hear us, I'm afraid. Pat. We can't hear you, Pat. I don't know.
Okay, I'm on.
Oh, there you are.
I am. I love technology. Okay. So thank you. You can hear me. Good.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Mayor and councillors, thank you for this opportunity to remind you about the events that took place in Montreal 31 years ago at L'École Polytechnique, and to look again at violence against women and ways that we can attempt to change the situation. Of course, December 6, 1989, these 14 young women were killed just because they were women. And we are remembering these women and honoring their lives and the lives of women living with violence. And while we honor their lives and commemorate their deaths, we cannot forget what has been called the attempted genocide of Indigenous women, as noted in the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls report. This report was delivered last June after several years of meetings with families and survivors. And the genocide has been empowered by colonial structures like the Indian Act, the 60s scoop residential schools, and breaches of human and First Nation rights, leading directly to the current increased rates of violence, death, and suicide in the Indigenous population. While Indigenous women and girls make up only 3% of the country's female population, they represent 10% of all female homicides in Canada. And since 2016, there have been 3 Indigenous women a month killed in Canada. A national action plan was to be released last June 2020 with 231 individual calls for change. It didn't happen, and I think it's another victim of COVID. So we've been told, or public health officials have been told, telling people to stay home. It's the safest place to be right now, but for many women and some men, this is not safe at all. And the pandemic of COVID-19 has been shadowed by a violence against women pandemic. Lorna Marsden, who is the former president of York University, says these are hard times and dangerous times for women. Economically, because women make up the vast service industry employee sector, where COVID has hit hard, and also within the traditional role of childcare and homemaking, where we've all seen the photos of women working from home on a laptop with children crawling all over them. But especially our purposes today, violence against women has increased exponentially along with the virus. With data from the Canadian Women's Foundation from July of this year, shelters reported a 20% increase in crisis calls, and 1 in 10 women in Canada feared for violence in their own homes. In Bruce and Grey counties, that should be March 2019, 2020, by the way, police calls report being down, and yet other services have spiked. And other police services across the province have noted this and have said it's like an eerie silence. Like, why aren't people reaching out to police? And I think it's because they're in their homes and they're trying to deal desperately with the situations they're in. John Farmer, Violence Prevention Grey Bruce, is about to release the annual snapshot that shares the stats, but he did share that statistics are much higher for calls related to violence and domestic abuse, and particularly with victim service calls and with visits to the ER related to assaults and sexual violence. And I had a conversation with Cheryl George from the Kabayashi Women's Shelter at Saugeen First Nations, and she reports that many families seem to have lost the ability to be happy. The ongoing poverty, often experienced on reserves, has been exacerbated by the financial duress that COVID and restrictions have caused. And families don't want to send their kids to school because they're worried about bringing COVID into the community. And the pressure mounts, and she said the violence in some homes just goes through the roof. And for the first time in 23 years, Kabayashi Women has been unable to support women and families from outside the community. And that really breaks her heart. So what can we do? Well, we're going to have a virtual vigil service this year on December 6th. And it's going to be 12 noon, and it will be a Zoom call. And I'll tell you about that again in a bit. Certainly invite your friends and families. We are requesting that you lower flags again on all county and municipal buildings. You did that last year, and that was a terrific reminder to everybody of what that day was about. We also are going to have an online donation button that you can go to support the local women's shelters. Talking about it with family and friends, and calling out gender-based bias and verbal assaults. And you know, you'd think at this point we're beyond that. And yet just last week, an independent review into harassment within the RCMP has found the force's culture is toxic and tolerates misogynistic and homophobic attitudes. And thousands have already come forward in detailed stories of assault, bullying, and despair. That's from a Global News article, November 19th. We can also lobby the federal government to deliver on long promised action plans that have to do with violence against women and the missing and murdered Indigenous women report. Well, because of what happened December 6th, 31 years ago, Canada does take this day to remember and act on violence, and we'll come together to try and change the attitudes and the policies and the laws. But at this time, we also want to remember the names of the women we lost that day. Annie Turcotte, Michelle Richard, Sonia Pelletier, Maryse Leclerc, Maryse Lagagnère, Anne-Marie Lemay, Barbara Klodznik Vidievich, Maud Habernick, Geneviève Bergeron, Anne-Marie Edward, Barbara Daniel, Natalie Croteau, Hélène Colgan, and Annie Saint Arnaud. So we want to invite you to join your community to try and fight the violence against women on December 6th. There will be this live vigil, and we'll need people to register with our program chair, Leslie Hall, and I've hopefully given you a live link there to Leslie's email address. Violence Prevention Grey Bruce will also be doing a YouTube video that day, and you can watch it and share that. And I've given you the website for that. And we're looking for donations to local online to the local online fundraiser. And we're right in the process of developing the page. So links to follow, and if it's appropriate, I think maybe if I could share those through Cheryl Grace, maybe she could share them with you if that's okay. So thanks for your attention. Many thanks also to all the agencies and organizations that make up the Coalition of Violence Prevention Grey Bruce. And thank you. If you've got questions, I'll take them.
Thank you very much, Pat. Are there questions or comments for Pat? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Pat. And I just wanted to take a moment. I have had the privilege of participating in the Vigil in years past, and despite the dark undertones of the day, you guys have done a wonderful job to provide a sense of remembrance for those lost. So thank you for that. I know you will do a fantastic job given the new and innovative ways to provide the same semblance of remembrance. I've gone to do a bit of further research based on the information that was provided to us, and it's staggering to see the effects that the pandemic is having on women, not just from a violence perspective, but also from an economic and a socioeconomic perspective. So thank you for being here and raising those items to us. I've also had the privilege of attending a CFUW meeting recently on long-term care, and what your organization is providing to the community in terms of education is phenomenal. So keep up the great work, and thank you so much for, I believe this is the second or third time that you've addressed council. And it's always, yes,
at least the second or third time.
and I always walk away having learned something. So thank you so much for bringing that education to us.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you. I think I saw the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, Pat, I remember being in university 31 years ago when the news came out about the shocking events at the Cole. And I just want to say thank you to you and the rest of the Women's Federation group for all you do to bring this forward, to make sure that we don't forget. Education is the key to solving this problem, and the more that we keep it out there, the more chance we have of solving this problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Further comments or questions? I'll just echo what my colleagues have said. Thank you again, Pat. It's good of you to come in and see us every year at this time and remind us of the Vigil and remind us of why you hold the Vigil. And it seems like every year the story is a little bit different. The causes of the violence changes. This year it's the pandemic, other times it's other things, but the through line seems to be that the violence continues, and it's intolerable. So we appreciate your bringing it to our attention and having this vigil every year so that we can remember. And I think there will be no trouble in telling you even now that the municipality will happily lower its flags to half-mast in recognition of this day on the 6th. So
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's wonderful.
So thank you very much, and have a good evening.
You too.
Okay, and that takes us to our final delegation, which is from Neil Minaj, and he's here to talk to us about the Transportation Master Plan. Mr. Minaj. You're muted there, Neil. There you are.
How about now? Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and Council, for another opportunity to speak to the draft Transportation Master Plan. And in particular, I'd like to speak with my presentation, if you'll indulge me. So, are you able to see this?
We don't see anything yet.
Okay, well then I need to go back, share the screen, right?
Yes.
Share the screen.
Oh, there it is. We've got it.
You've got it? Good.
Yep.
Okay, so Northeast Port Elgin is for me, featuring Arlington, Lennon, River Streets, and Eastward Drive. As you know, I was a previous Port Elgin Ward councillor and resident. I'm quite familiar with this area. would like to define it such that Gustavus Street is to the south, Wellington and Bricker Street to the west, and Eastwood to the east, and concession 10 ultimately would be to the north. So my question to you is, does the draft 2020 Transportation Master Plan version go far enough to adequately safeguard pedestrians in what amounts to a very busy location in our community? So this is about pedestrian safety. So to paraphrase these well-written statements by other municipalities and entities, I'd like to say, because pedestrians are the most vulnerable in the transportation discussion, sidewalks provide the required buffer for greater levels of comfort, security, and safety. And then I'm going to ask you that there should always be more than one solution to a problem. And so I'm asking you to consider the time is now to assign new money to this problem or to change the schedule starting in the 2022 budget. I think it's good that the draft Transportation Master Plan considers this adoption to highlight, and rightfully so, I think you would agree, that we should want to prioritize the safe and efficient movement of ourselves in the community. So it's right there for us, and it's in our official plan, and it's in the Transportation Master Plan. So specifically, I would like to talk about the role of the streets and roads in our particular area of town, the use, and the current condition. And then maybe we can look at some of the opportunities and suggestions for change. So I know that you know that we know a whole bunch of things together, and so I've listed many of them there. And in particular, the interesting things are the River Street, where I live, in Lennon and Eastwood Streets, they're defined as local roads. And local roads have a particular function in the community as an endpoint to where people will drive on a local road to get to their residence. So there's more to the story, obviously. So we opened a dog park. We have a neighborhood Eric Eastwood Park. We have a cardboard recycling depot. There's been many other things that have taken place. And so the increase in the amount of use of the roads. But note, when our children were young, many of these above uses were not there. And so, you know, I may have missed it until more recently. And my own aging vulnerability as well may have something to do with that. So I'm suggesting this is a need. It's not just a nice to have. Our official plan and how the streets are designed. This is taken from almost every document you can read about transportation. And it's clearly understood that the faster the traffic, the more likely they are onto a major freeway. And when they get to a local road, they're going to slow down access to property. But collector and distributor roads and streets, the speed is higher. It's bound to be higher. And we have a local official plan and a transportation plan showing all the trails and all the people movements. And this is important because it provides us with structure and guidance. This is the one, can you see my red cursor moving around here? So there's some interesting things here. This is the document that we were using and we are using. And clearly it's trying to indicate that the major arterial roads are in red: Bruce County Road 25, Highway 21, Goderich Street, and Gustavus Street, and probably concession 10 in this window of view. And the orange lines are more about local collector. I would like to say big C collector roads. No argument that Bruce Street in Waterloo and Bricker act as big collector streets. I do have a difference of opinion when it comes to Market Street in particular. It's showing that Market Street will act as a collector all the way until it meets Wellington Street, and then people will drive to the south on Wellington Street, and then they drive into a wooded lot somewhere in the future. This is just not happening. Market Street does not collect to Wellington Street. It's not a true statement. Wellington Street, all the way across river, this convoluted, I think you can see this intersection here that's offset is a particularly hazardous area. And Wellington Street, all the way out past the police station and onto concession 10 is where the locals go. Wellington Street is used as a collector road, and it is not identified as such. Arlington Street is supposed to be a collector street from Green Street. However, from Gustavus through Green and then to Mill and then to Elgin, it's all stop signs. Nobody travels on this piece of road considered a collector because of the stop signs. People like to freely move. And so the advantage is people will come up Elgin Street and join Arlington and move into this subdivision area here. It turned out during the traffic count study that Woodlawn, let's get the right name here. I always have to get that right name. I believe I live here and you'd think I remember it. So Woodland Drive is right here, and it connects Wellington to Arlington. And it was one of the most, in the traffic count study, it was one of the busiest streets in town, right behind Tomlinson. And that's because this whole area is bottlenecked through here and through River Street. Okay, to the end of this, Arlington Street is supposed to travel as a collector all the way out to concession 10. And that's something for the future. Who knows when that future will arrive? And the same with Bruce Street going all the way out to the 10th concession, more likely to arrive sooner than later. Waterloo Street likewise will probably end up going in that direction. So there are a number of big C collectors and there are a number of small C collectors. Falconer Street, everybody knows that Falconer Street is a busy collector street. And I'd like to add that River Street and Eastwood are also. So River Street is 6.5 blocks long and intersects with 5 major arterial and collector roads, west to east, as you can see here. River Street and Eastwood Drive function as collector roads, but they're not designated as such. So they didn't get the same treatment. So here you can see I've identified the first block of River Street and how people travel from River all the way up into Lennon. Lennon Street is here, and it takes you to the cardboard recycle and to the dog park and to Eastwood Park, where a lot of people spend a lot of time, and to the cemetery. A lot of visitors to the cemetery. And so these roads here are very busy roads, but don't have the designation. I don't know how I'm doing with my time. I'm just going to have to keep going here. If we agree with the classification changed from local to collector, then we need to review their current condition. They have no sidewalks. They have deficient surfaces by pavement condition index, deficient surfaces, and the width, they're narrow. They're generally not meeting our standard. Here you can see in this particular area, this area of Northeast Port Elgin I've addressed, everything in red is a street without a sidewalk. The blue is new sidewalk that Amanda Froese has added in recent months. And the yellow is a flush to the road without a curb. It's a vintage of 1960s, I believe. So you can see this whole area. The highlighted box is where I live, just so that you know. And River Street, of course, only was expanded through the railway line area, the railway yard, about 30 to 35 years ago. This is River Street. This is what it looks like. This is the cars parked on the street. River Street is falling apart, so is Eastwood. And the walkers who walk on this street By the way, there's a 70-page backup document I added as a report here with a lot of other additional photographs and additional information to highlight the issues. Some of them have my grandson walking with me and showing you winter and summer how difficult it is to walk with the traffic. So the walkers are closer to the traffic by more than 50% than they would be on any new block that has been constructed to standard. Interesting to note that when I joined council in 2014, the 15, 16, and 17 budget had River and Eastwood and Arlington all for upgrades on the budget, on the plan, in the 10-year plan. In my last year of council on the 2018 budget, I was surprised to find, in fact, I had been door to door. I am sorry, my 10 minutes are way up. So I've been door to door and told people it was going to happen, and then all these streets came off the plan in 2018. Toronto does sidewalk, saying that we should do sidewalks where there are no sidewalks and continuously connect them. We are installing sidewalks and making sidewalk repairs. My problem with it is we don't do it unless the above ground, the underground becomes a priority for repair. Then we can do the underground. I've suggested a new formula to change that. I've asked that the asset management plan include sidewalk priority system. There are many solutions, and one of them would be to push the whole plan out 1 year, the current 10-year plan, and put these problem roads without sidewalks into the year plan 2022. There are other examples. We could install sidewalks only with concrete or asphalt or gravel. We could install extra street lights where there are no sidewalks. These are all additional suggestions to give us a safe neighborhood. And what I'm saying is today we're putting $25,000 a year or $50,000 a year into new sidewalks or to repair sidewalks. I'm saying, how about we look at the streets that don't have any? You recently installed 30 kilometer per hour zone on North Shore Road where there was traffic problems with pedestrians, but we have no sidewalks at all, and we have a 50K zone. So extra stop signs at Wellington and River would slow the traffic down a little bit, maybe. Move the cardboard recycle depot to another part of the municipality to split up the amount of vehicles coming. Or you could stop up and close River Street like it was before at the rail trail. These are all low-cost options. Anyway, many of the residents are aging in place. Many have moved here recently with new young families. There are more children. We have increased the number of, there are 6 grades going to the high school now instead of 4. There are more children walking our streets with no sidewalks. And my summary comments are listed there. Dedicated, safe, and protected space for everyone. I would like you to request a full and detailed priority status of each road before approving the budget. And my hope is that you, working with staff, could accept my report as presented, work towards a single or a suite of solutions, and/or you and staff could complete a rebuttal statement, document, and publish the same. Finally, to wait beyond 10 years is to relegate those who live with these streets to make do with their best devices, because we're not even on the 10-year plan today. It's 10 years out at best. This is a request to end this cycle. The growth of our community is exacerbating the problem in concert with what I will frame as a historical-based budgeting system that isn't identifying or keeping up with these new trends, AKA River and Eastwood are collectors. I'm asking you to be pragmatic and prudent and make a commitment for change. And I'd like these 2 asks. You attach my report and the slides to the Transportation Master Plan as some sort of appendix so that it doesn't get lost and forgotten. Then you don't have to listen to me come back and ask again. And you agree by requesting staff to modify the 10-year plan and the 5-year budget. They don't sync, they're not in sync. And have a look at what we need in our area commencing 2022. And thank you for your indulgence on me going over time.
All right, thank you, Neil. Yeah, comments, Councillor Maya.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Neil, it's so nice to hear from you again. 70 pages report in your spare time. I'm impressed, I must say. With regards to the streets you point out, and certainly you are very correct, there are no stop signs, and at certain times of year, as in school times particularly, this could be construed as a hazard. And I agree with you that we need to step up the sidewalk campaign. But how confident are you that you speak for everybody that lives on the street? Because not that long ago, in a town just a little bit north of Port Elgin, Southampton, there was a plan to put in curbs and sidewalks in certain streets, and we ended up with a petition that we want it like that. We don't change. We like the soft shoulders, and we like it the way it's been with the sandy lanes and the way it's always been when we came here and walked as we were kids with bare feet on the side of the road. So it's a delicate thing to balance sometimes, from people like the small town feel with the grass right up to the edge of the asphalt, and some people like a more, such as yourself apparently, a more modern and urban look and feel to it. So have you had the opportunity to poll your neighbors on this plan?
Yeah, thanks for the question, and the answer is yes. And it's the usual, in my estimation, it's the usual 80-20 type, 80-20 type response. 80% are in favor and saying, what's the holdup and why have we been neglected as long? I recall Get a Street down in the Treed area, bottom of Market. There was a huge petition against it. And the very same people, after we pushed it through and completed it, said, why were we complaining? This is the best thing that ever happened to us. We don't build sidewalks. I did a cast with the town earlier in my term, and when we first started them, and we don't build sidewalks for us today necessarily. We build them for the future. We build them to maintain safety. It's a standard. Amanda Froese will tell you that, our director will tell you that sidewalks are a critical infrastructure. You don't get to, the people who come forward in Southampton were in error by choosing. They did well to negotiate something that they felt was appropriate for their particular area, but having no safety for walkers in connection right beside moving vehicles is not appropriate, in my opinion.
All right, thank you. Any other comments or questions for Mr. Minaj? Councillor Smith, and then we'll get Councillor Schreider.
Thank you, Mr. Minaj, and thank you for all of your efforts as a Port Elgin Ward Councillor in years past, several times, in fact. As someone who represents the Port Elgin Ward, and undoubtedly I've talked that often we don't necessarily get to speak to our ward specifically, but in this case, having lived in that area myself, I used to reside on Arlington, on the north end of Arlington, and having interacted quite regularly with the residents who live there, I too share a number of your concerns. Your historical education on the history of some of those streets, I was not aware of, even having lived there myself, so I appreciate that. The one factor that I would add to that area is we now have a 24-hour fitness center sort of in that cluster of streets as well, which could pertain to having more active transportation late at night or even earlier in the evening, but in darkness hours where, like you mentioned, there are no safe allocation for pedestrians. I appreciate your efforts, much like Dave has suggested. And I'm not sure on the methodologies that you've suggested in terms of what to do with this report, but I know that you've shared with us and enlightened us to a number of concerns, and I hope we can carry those forward to find some resolutions for you and all of the residents in that area.
Thank you.
Councillor Schreider.
Thank you, and through you, thank you so much, Neil. I think that both Jamie and I probably really appreciate a document like this, knowing that you came from exactly where we're sitting as well. I too am very familiar about the area in which you're speaking, and there's other pockets in Port Elgin and in Southampton and in Saugeen Township, but Port Elgin that isn't mentioned in here that we have similar issues in. And that's where I believe the value in a plan like this, a master plan, a transportation master plan, is that they will provide us with those tools in order to evaluate all of those subdivisions and lack of sidewalks, or do we need more sidewalks or not, and how do we plow them and be able to maintain them? Because it's one thing to build them, and then it's the second thing is to plow them and maintain them and driving those operating costs. If I could, I'd love to have a sidewalk on every street in all of Saugeen Shores. I just don't know that that's possible. I, for myself, know that this 70-page document will be something that I refer to, not just tonight. I will refer to it, Neil, in the upcoming budget, and refer to it when staff reports do come through, and also when we refer to our transportation master plan. I think it's an excellent document, and I really do appreciate it. Maybe a comment for Amanda when she actually presents the report, and I'm not sure if she's if she can answer it now, but I see in the report summary that comments were received up until November 13th. And I'm not sure if Neil had submitted his comments, or some of his comments, or this document actually included in the transportation master plan. Did he, I'll say, meet that deadline? I think it would be unfortunate if some valid points weren't included, if he didn't meet a deadline.
Yeah. Could I add to that just a minute, Mr. Mayor? I did try to make the same presentation in July, August, September, October, and now November, and know that it's because you've been so busy with so many other things. And I think Linda will attest to the fact that this presentation was ready way before the deadline. And I did make a presentation via the open house, and I did send in a number of questions that were well answered, and I rebutted the answers as well to Amanda, our director, and I thank you and her for that.
We can certainly let the director speak to it, but I think my guess is there won't be any difficulty including these comments, like any other contribution from any other member of the public in the report. Is that a fair statement, Amanda?
Through Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure. I do want to follow that up with what's appropriate. We do have the email from Mr. Minaj, the previous presentation from Mr. Minaj, but I didn't have this one or the report. The presentation's short. It's not that big a deal, but the 72-page document as one comment from a resident would be unique. So it's something that I will follow up to make sure that that is appropriate to put in.
Sure.
Thank you for that, Amanda. I appreciate that. And again, Neil, I just want to say thank you very much that this document will be referred to many times by myself for sure.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, the Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I wrote down 8 or 10 questions, but I'm not going to ask 8 or 10 questions. I do have a few comments though, and I would like to ask Neil a couple of questions. Neil, a tremendous amount of work, and I read it front to back, 70 pages, and there's good stuff in there. And I just want to commend you. You know this town, you know it well, particularly that northeast corner. And River Street, and we were trying to move people off of, out of their cars and onto streets, and cyclists and walkers. And there are some streets in this community that, in my view, require sidewalks. And I do travel River a lot to get to Arlington Street. And, that's that street with the cardboard depot added, and the cemetery up there and Eastwood Park. That's one street I really actually do believe is begging a sidewalk. If it's only one side, so be it. And I'm disappointed it's not in there. I think it should be in there. Arlington Street, north-south to get to the high school and the grade 7, 8, that sidewalk needs to happen sooner or later. That's a busy road for pedestrians. But I guess the question I have, I'm not quite clear on, and maybe you can comment on, Neil. When I look at River Street and the condition of it, I don't think it's one of the better conditioned streets in Saugeen Shores. Certainly better shape than Snyder Road. But I think that I'm just wondering, why, well, you or Amanda want to ask, but Neil, let me turn it over to you first. Why isn't it not in the 10-year plan, I guess? In your document, you're saying it's not, but it should be, in my view. So why aren't we reconstructing River with the sidewalk? Can you comment on that?
I can. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, if I'm allowed to. I'm sure that Amanda will support me, and she has better information than I do, but just a quick summary. the condition index that is derived on many things, but the surface area, there's a document 10 pages thick, I suppose, that talks about how the road is cracking and coming apart, et cetera. And Eastwood is ranked something like 75% deficient, and River is listed at 55% deficient over a brand new road. So there's a trigger point that says that at a certain PCI, that would enable Amanda to come to you and say, we should be doing this on the budget. But that's not it. It doesn't stop there. And that's the difficulty with River and Eastwood, is that they don't have any major below ground equipment that requires attention. And an example would be Orchard. Orchard is a local road that was done last year. Beautiful piece of road. It has the same number of driveways and homes on it as River Street does for 2 blocks. Orchard was full of root ball invasion into the septic system and the water systems, and Amanda had to do it because it was a major problem. So River and Eastwood do not have those underground problems, and so they drop off the priority list. That's why I offered a different formula to try and say, at some point, if a road has been in existence for greater than 50 years, it should get so many points. If it doesn't have any sidewalks, it should get so many points. And then if you add it up, it would challenge against an Orchard for priority as well. Anyway, that's my thought, and thank you for the comment and question.
Okay, I have a bunch of other questions, but I think I'll just finish off here. There's been lots of good questions, but you know, if I was sitting in Amanda's seat, I think I probably would want to reach out. This is a solid report, and I guess I want to ask you this question, Neil: is if there was a subcommittee set up to take a look at some of these details, or maybe some of the things in the tourism master plan that, you know, that I think some of your suggestions aren't in the plan, and I think there are some really, really good recommendations in there. Does some of you sit down with 3-4 people and talk about if you're asked?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I'll answer the question. And you know me, many of you know me. I think all of you do by now, including Amanda, of course, and served with the waterfront master plan as well. And it's difficult to come before you and make negative commentary on something that is very important and in this particular time of our lives. But yes, of course, I would sit with anybody that would have me and go through it page by page, item by item, and say, you know, they got this right, and maybe they should have added this, and work towards something that Amanda could support and you could support that would offer change.
Okay, I mean, I know we had lots of opportunity for comment from the public for this tour, you know, from the transportation master plan, but I think this takes it to another whole new level, and I would encourage something like that. I don't know whether Amanda wants to go there or not. I think that it would be valuable to hear for Bruce Street, for example. There was a presenter a few weeks ago up in your area. I think it'd be a good idea. Anyways, I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anything further from Mr. Minaj? I think thanks very much, Neil, for all of the work that you've done on this. We always appreciate hearing from you and on subjects like this. And I think it's true that you know, the Vice Deputy Mayor Ray Snyder Road, there's an example of how when there isn't underground infrastructure driving a reconstruction project, how those reconstruction projects tend to get put off in favor of ones where we have to work on underground infrastructure. And so that's I think it's a real thing that you're identifying as an issue, and one that we have to figure out how to assess clearly. Just because a road doesn't have water and sewer under it doesn't mean it will last forever. I mean, it still needs to be replaced at some point, and we're seeing that on Snyder Road. And I think it's important also to be clear, one of the reasons why River Street came off the 10-year capital forecast was because council approved a 10-year capital forecast without the River Street development. We have agency in this. We approved those 10-year plans, and when that came forward, we took it out. And so I think that, you know, council, what I'm trying to get at there is that council can set priorities, and council can decide what needs to be worked on and find a way to do that. And so, you know, I think that those are discussions that we can and will have. So I thanks for shedding light on that, Neil. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you for your time.
Have a good evening. Okay, so that moves on then to item 6, which is a public meeting. It's to do with an application by David and Catherine Newman, care of 1234841 Ontario Incorporated, Cayley's Grain Limited, and it's an application, zoning bylaw application related to 2635 Bruce Road 40, and we'll turn it over to Ron. I guess we're turning it over to Jay Posner. Jay.
If I may, I'm just going to introduce Barbara Mugabe, the town planner. She'll provide the planning report, and then we'll turn it back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Barbara.
Yes.
Go ahead, Barbara, anytime.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the opportunity to present the application. I was out on a site inspection 2 weeks ago and took some photographs of buildings and structures on the subject land. It's a farm property, and this is the north-facing or front view of the farmhouse.
We're not seeing your presentation there, Barbara, so you can share your screen there.
Okay, can you see it now?
Not yet, no. Maybe perhaps if you're having difficulty, Barbara, maybe someone on our end can share it, and
I can do that here.
we'll get Jay to give it a try here. There we go. Okay, we have it there now, Barbara. So, and just let Jay know when you need to advance the slides.
Okay. I can't see the slide. I'm not seeing your presentation, Jay.
Well, I'm just on the first slide.
Okay.
Let me know when you go on that.
Okay. So if I could get the second slide, please. Okay, so I was out on a site inspection and took some photographs of buildings and structures on the subject land. It's a farm property, and this is the front view of the farmhouse. The next slide.
Okay.
This is the east side of the dwelling. The dwelling is proposed to be severed from the agricultural lands.
Still not shifting through these slides, Jay, or?
Okay, well, I'm at the part where there's a little, trailer in the rear.
We're not seeing it. We're still on the first slide.
Huh. Okay, let me see.
There you go.
Okay.
Carry on, Barbara.
Okay, so this slide shows the west side of the dwelling. It appears to be in good condition and is said to be occupied. The next slide. Situated to the south of the dwelling are 2 agricultural storage buildings, which are accessed with their own driveway and entrance from the county road. It is proposed that the storage buildings remain with the retained agricultural lands. Surrounding land uses are a mix of agricultural uses and non-farm residential lots. There's private water and septic system for servicing. The property is accessed via Bruce Road 40, which is a year-round municipal road. Purpose of the application. This application proposes to rezone the retained agricultural lands to prohibit future residential development. Secondly, the application seeks to recognize the undersized severed parcel, which is which is 0.48 hectares instead of the minimum requirement of 5 hectares, and is deficient in yard setbacks. If approved, the proposed amendment would facilitate the severance of a surplus farm dwelling from the balance of the agricultural lands. The subject land is designated agricultural areas, rural areas, hazard land areas in the Bruce County official plan. The zoning is agricultural and environmental protection. There were no objections from the town and agencies. Enbridge Gas, operating as Union Gas, advises that they have service lines running within the area, which may or may not be affected by the proposed severance. Should the proposed severance impact these services, they have indicated that it may be necessary to relocate the line according to the new property boundaries. We received a few comments from members of the public. A question was posed from a member of the public about the meaning or significance of the proposed special zone provision AG-67. My response is that the AG represents the agricultural zoning on the retained land. The number 67 represents a special provision, and its significance is that new residential development will be prohibited on the retained parcel. A second question was posed: can someone make an application on behalf of another property owner? And my response is that in this situation, the current owners of the subject land are David and Catherine Newman. They own only this farm parcel and therefore do not qualify to make an application for a severance for a surplus farm dwelling. The numbered company, Kelly's Grain Limited, though not yet the owner of the subject land, is in the process of purchasing the property. However, is only interested in the farm parcel. The farmhouse is surplus to his needs as he owns another residence elsewhere. Because he's a bona fide farmer who owns and actively farms other farm properties in Bruce County and has a principal residence elsewhere in Bruce County, he is qualified for these reasons to submit an application for a surplus farm dwelling severance. A condition of approval of the consent application will be imposed, requiring that his solicitor provide an undertaking to register the retained parcel in the name of Mr. Kelly's numbered company. The planning department has accepted this approach to the planning process, Mr. Mayor, and in the past has processed similar applications submitted by applicants who are in the process of acquiring the subject lands. We also received comments to the effect that the public notice for the application was incomplete and concerns have been expressed about county policies. My response is that the notice mailed to the public met the requirements of the Planning Act and the proposal conforms to the county official plan. In summary, this zoning bylaw amendment is requested to zone the retained lands to prohibit future residential development and to recognize the undersized severed parcel. The proposed amendment will facilitate the severance of a surplus farm dwelling. The application maintains the intent and purpose of the official plan and zoning bylaw and constitutes good land use planning. We are recommending approval and that the necessary bylaw be forwarded to Council for adoption. That concludes my presentation. I'll take any questions if there are any.
Okay, thank you very much, Barbara. And we'll ask if there are questions or comments from members of the, well, first, I guess this is a public meeting, right? So we have to, pardon me, let me just go back here. So it's a public meeting, so I guess we do have a few folks who want to speak here. And first we'll ask Ron Davidson on behalf of the applicant. Mr. Davidson.
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. I shall keep this very brief. Barbara did an excellent job in just explaining the proposal. As your council is quite aware from almost identical applications that I've filed in the past for Mr. Cayley, he is in fact a bona fide farmer. He just lives outside of Port Elgin. He's in the process of acquiring this property, and the house on it is definitely surplus to his needs. The official plan for Bruce County, as reads the same way basically as the provincial policy statement, in lands that are designated agricultural, or in other words, prime agricultural land, you're not supposed to create lots except in the instance where there's a surplus farmhouse. And Mr. Cayley does meet the policies of both the official plan and the provincial policy statement in that regard. It's really a straightforward application. We're severing off a house in a minimal amount of land in order to keep the cash crop lands intact. And just quickly, from a neighbor's perspective, they won't notice any changes. There's no new buildings ever allowed. So it's not like they're going to wake up one day and see something different. The only thing that will change will be there will be a lot line drawn around the perimeter of the house and the 1 acre that goes with that. That's it, sir, and members of council, for my presentation. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll just ask the clerk to be certain, are there any other or are there any members of the public who wish to speak to council as part of this public meeting?
No, Mr. Mayor, there's no further speakers to this application.
Thank you very much. Okay, so then we'll ask members of council if you have any questions or comments. The Deputy Mayor. Oh, still on mute there, Donnie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I believe Ms. Mugabe and Mr. Davidson have pointed out everything that we need to know about this. It's excellent land use. It's severing off a parcel to ensure that the agricultural land stays going, and I will be supporting this.
Thank you. Councillor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this also represents good land use planning. Just a couple of things I wanted to ask about is the retained portion of land is going to have the 2 agricultural buildings, the storage sheds. So being that there be no severance in the future, is it true then that those buildings could never be severed off of that retained parcel of land? Question number 1.
Who wants to take that one? Can you provide an answer, Mr. Davidson?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, this simply put, the agricultural policies will not allow for a severance on this property. You can't build a new house and sever it off. It has to be an existing house. So those buildings, in case you're wondering, will come in handy for Mr. Cayley with all the machinery that he has. I'm sure he's looking forward to owning a couple of extra buildings here.
All right. I'm well familiar with Mr. Cayley's machinery. He lives just across the way here. In fact, this house that I'm in was a Cayley severance some 25 years ago. The second question is the severed off a piece of land. You said that there would never be any building allowed. Say in the future, the person that ends up owning that piece of land wanted to put up, for instance, a shed or a single car garage that fit within the land maximum square footage. Would that, you said it could never be built, or you'd say, if somebody made an application 10 years from now to put a single car garage, because it looks like there's a cement pad there already. Would that, so never is never?
Why don't we put that one to Jay Posner? Jay?
Oh, I only turned the mute off just in case. But yeah, certainly that a never is a little too strong. I think certainly someone wanted a garage or a shed, they could apply, get a building permit, meet the zoning requirements. That's certainly acceptable.
It's conceivable. Yeah. All right, good. Thank you. I too think this is a good idea.
All right. Any other comments? Councillor Smith.
Yes, thank you. And through you, much like Councillor Mayette, 25 years ago, this piece of property was actually the Lamont, the piece of property in which my father was born and raised. So I'm very familiar with the property. I'm excited to see new life brought to it, but I do have a question regarding the undersized severed parcel. Is said to be 0.48 hectares. I'm curious, is the justification for the undersized lot parcel simply because the parameter of that is usable farmland? I'm just curious why we wouldn't expand it to the average size.
Yeah, Mr. Davidson.
Yes, thank you for that question. That's absolutely right. The whole goal here is to keep as much farmland intact as possible. It's only undersized with regard to your zoning bylaw. And that's, I'm not saying that's not a good thing. But when you have 0.48 hectares, which is just over an acre of land, that is ample size for a house, a septic system, and a well. So there should really be no concerns in that regard.
Okay, anything else? I would just say I support the application, absolutely. I would say that it's an example of an overall larger problem with our zoning bylaw in that it contradicts itself. It says on one hand that we should preserve as much active farmland as we can. And on the other hand, when somebody comes and tries to do that, they have to spend several $1,000s to make a very minor adjustment to setbacks and to go 0.2 hectares under the limit. You know, I've said several times that we need to amend these surplus farm dwelling severance policies in our zoning bylaw. We need to get it done. We have far too many surplus farmland severance applications that should not be necessary. And so, you know, I implore staff to review this and come give us an opportunity to review it because it needs to be reviewed. But I support the application. And there is a recommendation, and the recommendation is that committee approve the zoning bylaw amendment Z 2020-062 as attached, and the necessary bylaw be forwarded to council for adoption. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Okay, so that moves us on to a report of municipal officers and committees, and 7.3 infrastructure and development. We have several reports there, and the first one is a staff report on the water system financial plan, and we'll turn it over to I guess maybe Colin, are you taking this one?
Yes, Your Worship, I'll answer to that
Okay.
tonight or speak for a few minutes here.
Yes, sir.
First of all, just give a bit of history on financial plans. We're mandated through ORAID 1445307 to have a financial plan. Now, they're triggered, they're a 6-year plan, and they're triggered with our municipal drinking water license. When it's renewed, we have to renew our plan. Our license comes due in April of 2021. So that's why we're working on the plan this fall. Work on a 5-year license, but we do a 6-year plan, and that way we have a bit of continuity going through, basically is what we're looking there. Our existing plan was done by Cobite Engineering, and I've asked Dave Burnside is the author of that plan, and this one as well. He's on the meeting tonight, as you can see. If there's any questions, technical questions, he'll be able to help us out with that. We retained Cobite again to do this this update as much as anything, as we have continuity. They understand it, they understand the system. And let's face it, if Dave doesn't understand our system, it's pretty tough. He's got a pretty good knowledge about all of it. The plan's basically what we're trying to do with them as mandated in the reg is have some stability, stability in funding, and to have something in reserves towards the end of the plan. What the province is looking at is they want municipalities to be able to fund their own systems with help from them as far as different grants that are coming through. And that's basically what we look at when we put our plan together. Council's not bound by these plans. It's not to say, as it's set out in my report, it's not to say this is the plan and this is what you have to do. What these are is a plan to recommend what we're looking at, taking into so many factors what we're looking at. A lot of capital work has to be done. A lot of funding that might come in, revenues that come in, and this is what this plan looks at. Then what we look at when we have a recommendation is what we're needing for revenue on an annual basis to fund the system. It's not necessarily what we set as our rates per year. That's set in our budget, and that's set in our fees and services bylaw and that type of thing. What we're looking at in these plans is a revenue source and a sound revenue that we know in 3, 4, and 5, 6 years, we are on a sound financial footing. And that's what the province is looking for us to do. So in this plan, what we've come up with, the existing one had 8% increases, annual increases. Reviewing what we're looking at over the next 6 years, we're able to bring this down. We're not needing as much. We're sitting better as far as a debt load. It will be eliminated, greatly diminished by the end of this plan. So we're looking at it decreasing that. Instead of the 8, we go an 8 down to a 6%, then a net 4% annually, and then 3% after that. With that in the plan, that leaves us in an area where as staff, we feel we're comfortable as far as reserves. And the end of this, we will be sitting with reserves in around the $1.6 million. Where we want to be, if we can be, is between $1 and $1.5 million is what our thought is as far as staff. So that's what we've come up with in the report. The Dave's financial plan is attached with the report as well. And the two of us are here if you have any questions, any comments, or anything you'd like to move forward with.
Great, thank you, Colin. I'll read the recommendation, then we can take questions or comments. It's recommended that Council adopts the Water System Financial Plan from 2021 through 2027. Questions or comments from members of the committee? The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Colin. A great report, and you're a valued employee. You do a great job for the town, Colin. We really appreciate. And Dave, good seeing you back in the chair here. It's been a long time, so appreciate you being with us tonight. Colin, when you talk about the adequate reserve by 2027, just tell me again. It's probably in the report somewhere. I probably missed it, but what's the number again by 2027 that you consider to be adequate?
The goal we're looking at is try to have around between $1 and $1.5 million. Now, Dave, I haven't got it in the report. Do you have the actual figure if we go with these rate increases? I believe it's around 1.6.
There, just try and unmute. Yeah, it'd be 1.4 at the end of the 27.
Okay, thanks for that. And I just, when you talk about the 8% annual increase and then lowering it down over time, Colin, what in the past 5 years, what have the increases been?
I think as far as historically, I think Amanda would probably be the best to speak to that, where we've been. I can't speak this year. It's planned for 8% as far as the financial plan. Previously, Amanda, where would we be with that?
Can you, over the past 5 years, Amanda, can you throw any numbers at us, or?
Thank you. Through you, last year, 2019 was an 8% increase. The previous 2 years were 2%, and I'm not sure before that, but I can find out if you want me to go back to 5.
I'd just be curious over 5.
It's been 2.
Okay, thanks. But I'd just be curious over a 5-year period and see where we're heading, to get to that 1.1 to 1.5. And you think that's, Colin and Dave, that's where we need to get to. That's your opinion, right? That's what you're thinking? That'll put us in good standing.
We have a safety zone with that. Anything less, and we will, with this plan, we will be in the negative. We are right now, and we will continue in the negative depending on what we look at for increases. And that gets to be a bit scary. It doesn't look for a future, a long-term future, even short-term. So this is where we're looking at with the expenses and how expensive it is to maintain capital work in a system. $1 million can be ate up pretty quick. That's where we came with those figures.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Further comments? We'll get Councillor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And it's when reading reports like this that I relish the idea of being on my own well and water system out here and septic system. But I do get calls. I've had a number of calls from people that live in the urban areas that they're on water bills, and there's significant concerns with regards to the portion of the water bill which is allocated towards water and sewer usage, and the portion of the bill that's allocated towards future capital. And I think this report goes a long way to explaining what that is. We just heard it's an expensive system to operate. $1 million doesn't get you very far. We just spent 1.5 or 1.6 million on a water tower in Port Elgin. I won't go into the funding breakdown of that, but we spent most of the reserves on that, and it's inevitable that the costs are going to go up, and all we can do about that as users of the system is to conserve, and the more that we can conserve during peak times, the longer we can stave off these major additions to the system. So I'm glad that the report is here and that it answers a lot of questions. But that said, there are people out there that struggle with the concept of $80 or $90 every 2 months allocated directly towards a capital portion of the system. And in fact, most times the actual water consumption is the smallest portion of the bill.
Okay, thank you. Further comments? I don't see any. I guess comment for myself, as I would be interested, Colin, Dave, Amanda, as we head into the 2021 budget discussion, if we can look at other ways to set this up. I appreciate the cost. The capital costs are there. We're going to make these. We have to make these investments. We have an outstanding water treatment and supply system, and we want to keep it that way, and we have to make those investments. But there's also the imperative of a year where several people, particularly businesses, are struggling, and where an 8%, if this 8% revenue increase becomes an 8% rate increase, that could be problematic in the year 2021. And since we have this scale where we have a very high increase scheduled in 2021 and it declines over time, it would be interesting to know if there are other ways that we could structure those increases to level them out over time and potentially reduce the 2021 increase. It's a big hit in 2021. Now, we're not setting those rates today, so you have some time to think about it and to consider how you might do that. But on the other hand, it's critical that, I understand what you said, Colin, that council has the option as to whether or not to fund this financial plan. But in all honesty, we don't really. I mean, we have to fund water the way we have to fund water. If you put together a financial plan, if we don't fund it, and something goes wrong with the system, that's not acceptable. So I think I would like to see you look at the financial plan and see if there's another way for you to structure these increases that might enable us to have a lower increase in 2021 and potentially spread this out over more time. So that's my own thought. Are there any other questions or comments?
May I, through you, Mr. Mayor, just confirm that we are working with COBI to do a rate study. So they're looking at our rates, comparing them to other municipalities and this financial plan. So that is underway currently. So hopefully we'll have information to be able to show you different options when it comes to the fees and charges background studies or fees and charges bylaw.
Yeah, and that's the time when we can have that discussion in more detail. Okay, if there's nothing further, then you've heard the recommendation and I'll ask all in favor. That's carried. Okay, so then that moves us on to the staff report on the transportation master plan and the director.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. This report is following up on the draft final report that we brought to the Committee of the Whole. We left the comment period open until November 13th, and we did receive a number of comments. This report summarizes those comments for your review, plus it explains the 9 proposed changes that we wish to make in the Transportation Master Plan. All of these changes have come from the comments. Following tonight, the final report will be placed on the website for everybody to view and for us to start working through some of the recommendations. So each project that we want to bring forward will come back as part of a capital program or a new policy or updates to the bylaws. One thing that I wanted to note in our report is that one piece of the comments that we got a lot of were specific streets and intersections to do analysis of. So I wanted to give council an idea of that list that we'll be working through right starting ahead or starting in December. So you'll see that attachment. There are some that need some further information. So we'll be gathering those traffic numbers in those areas. We could do it in the winter of 2021, but because of weather, that probably will be the spring. There's a number that we already have the information of, and we'll review those right away, come back in. That Bruce Street is still one where we're going to do the stop sign analysis at Joseph and Bruce, but that is one where we'll look at trying to see if we can move forward with different traffic calming measures for Bruce Street as an entirety. So you will see that on here as a stop sign control, but it doesn't mean that we're missing that traffic control or traffic calming piece. The other important thing to note is there's a recommendation for the 40-kilometer speed reduction. So I would like to bring those pieces to the traffic bylaw back in January. So you won't see them at the December meeting, but it'll give us some time to prepare some more public information and do those things through an open and transparent public process. So with that, I'll open it up to questions.
All right, we have a recommendation. I'll read it, then we can take questions or comments if I can get up to it. Here it is. It's recommended that council receives the Transportation Master Plan. Questions or comments? Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Amanda, for all your work on this and for accommodating new comments from people. One question that I've had a lot, I've talked to you about this, but I'm going to ask you if you can speak to it a bit. The McNabb Highway 21 intersection and the Transportation Master Plan recommends sometime in the future that concerns over this intersection would be best solved by installing a roundabout. Many people have asked me why traffic lights would not be an acceptable alternative to a roundabout. And I understand that the roundabout has not been established as a set solution. That's something that would have to go through many stages before that happens. But would you speak to the provincial standard and guideline that's used for determining whether traffic lights might be installed at an intersection that crosses a provincial highway?
Sure, and thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. There's a Transportation Association of Canada standard where you do an analysis of cross streets to see what is warranted when it comes to traffic signals. And when it becomes the highways, the collector, the main road, you have to have so many cars that are not being able to get through at a level of service considered an F or a failure. It's taking too long. And we don't meet that warrant at McNabb. There's actually, they looked at many streets through Southampton and we didn't meet them at any of them. So the through road is functioning properly through that intersection and the cross street is not functioning so improperly that traffic lights are warranted. It is recognized in the plan though that the existing condition is not great either. And the solution in between the do nothing and the traffic signals is where the roundabout comes up as a proposed solution.
Thank you.
Further comments to the recommendation? Councillor Schreider, and then we'll get the Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, and through you, Amanda, I just thank you so much for this. I'm really happy to see Joseph and Bruce streets, and we're looking at it to be reviewed in 2020 and for traffic calming and speed control requests as well, and even a crossing guard request. So I think that we've heard that many times. I know me and Jamie both, and probably others. So thank you very much, because that is a high priority. We are waiting for this report to come forward to address this area and others. But thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing some solutions in that area of town.
Very good. The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to echo Councillor Schreider's comments. Amanda, Joseph, and Bruce, thank you for that. And on behalf of the residents there, I think that that'd be a welcome assessment that you're about to carry out. So I do appreciate that. I know the neighbors appreciate it. I'm doing cherry pick here a little bit. We heard a delegation from County Road 40 on the 80-kilometer speed limit, wanting a 60-kilometer speed limit. And you'll be looking, is that in your report? I think you've indicated that there'd be further study. Is that one of the roads where, Amanda, where you're going to be doing assessment to see whether it should be 50, 60, 70, 80? And how, sorry, Amanda. And the other question is, when will that happen?
So thank you. And through you, concession 4 is on the list for the speed reduction analysis as well. That'll be done in December because we do have those traffic counts.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. Yep.
Okay, further comments? Oh, the Councillor Maya.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the things that I gleaned out of the Transportation Master Plan was where you have transitions from one speed limit to another speed limit. And there's a number of areas in our community where we go from an 80 right down to a 40. And I think the plan said you should have no more than a 20-kilometer-per-hour step change and reduction. Is that one area that you've identified anywhere in your analysis that we could look at? I know a couple of places where that takes place.
Thank you. And through you, sir, I'm aware of 2 where that is, one on Peel Street and one on Concession 6. So yes, those 2 areas will be looked at, and speed limits will be changed to go from 80 to 60 to 40.
And there are others in the possession of the county. And I can tell you that the county is also looking at those issues, particularly County Road 17 as it comes over the hill towards Westlinks. That's an area that I've heard concern about, and there's a 30-kilometer-an-hour step down there. And I just wanted to make council aware that Bruce County is also adopting a similar policy and looking to implement it. Any further questions or comments? I don't see any, so I will just reiterate my thanks to you, Amanda, and to your team for your work on the Transportation Master Plan. I have to say that I think the public consultation in particular on this plan has been really excellent. And I think it's a good example of how to do a thing like this. And I think members of the public who have concerns, they may still have their concerns, but I don't think they could say that they haven't been listened to in this process, or that their thoughts haven't been recorded and been given their fair opportunity to influence this process. And that's thanks to your work. So thank you very much, Amanda. You've heard the recommendation, so I'll ask all in favor. That's carried. Okay, then that moves us then on to staff report on Bruce County Planning Services Agreement, and there's also a presentation by Strategy Corp and Bruce County staff. Jay, you want to kick this one off?
Okay, I guess I'm just quickly introducing both Mark Paoli from Bruce County and Mary Ellen Bench from Strategy Corps, who are both here to present council with the draft agreement, planning services agreement that we use with Bruce County Planning Department, and to inform us of its status, and otherwise, if there's questions or that sort of thing, to proceed with that. I don't know if there's others on the call as well. They have probably already shown themselves through video, but I'll turn it from here.
Thank you, Jay, and Mayor and Council. My name is Mark Paoli, and I'm the Manager of Land Use Planning at Bruce County. And I want to start by thanking staff for finding a way to get us onto this agenda after the power outage last time. I'm joined by Mary Ellen Bench and Aidan Grove White from Strategy Corps, as well as Matt Mead from our Corporate Projects Office. I'll begin with a quick background to this item, and then we'll turn the presentation over to Mary Ellen. Back in the summer, County Council endorsed the findings of a review of the role and structure of the county's land use planning division that was based in part on interviews with key local staff. One of the key findings of that report was the need to review and update the agreements under which we have been providing local planning services, and it's to make the roles and scope of the service current, clearer, and more consistent for all parties. So then, with funding from the province's Municipal Modernization Program, Strategy Corps was retained to undertake this project. The draft agreement being presented this evening is to gather information and feedback from council, and at this stage we're not looking for endorsement or adoption. Strategy Core will take the feedback from all the council meetings and bring that together into a final draft for consideration by county council in December and then by local councils next year. So I'll now turn it over to Mary Ellen Bench from Strategy Core to present the remainder of their presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. So can everyone see the presentation?
Yep. We can see it.
Wonderful. Okay, so I think Mark has covered the beginning part of it. So I'm going to move forward to the draft memorandum of agreement and its recommendations. The process we went through, as Mark said, involved staff in the local municipalities, first one-on-one, and then the CAO table after that. So we got input there, and then it went to county council, and now it's coming to the local municipalities. So what came out of that process was areas where there were lack of clarity and areas where there were improvements that could be made. So we're going to go through those today. So planning authority is divided in the Planning Act between responsibilities assigned to the county and responsibilities assigned to local municipalities. There are also other areas that are shared. And on the policy side and project development side, we've set out how some of those would be handled with some timelines so that everyone knows where things will start. Because in municipalities across the province, one thing that's common is that nobody has enough staff to do all the work that comes in the door. So coming up with ways that everybody knows what the ground rules are and what the expectations are was important. So when we looked at priorities and prioritization, we looked at the three different kinds of matters that typically are referred to planning. So development applications became the first priority. And the main reason for that is development applications involve third parties. They have control of the timelines to an extent because under the Planning Act, there are timelines to respond once you have a complete application. And if they take a matter to the LPAT without a council decision, you're at a disadvantage. Your rights are diminished. So those had to be priority, and there seemed to be like full consensus on that. Next area is the local official plan and zoning bylaw comprehensive reviews. And those matters have to be looked at as very important, but they cascade from the review of the official plan at the county level, because the county must comply with what's in the provincial policy statement. Local municipalities comply with what's in the county and so on. And then the zoning bylaw complies with what's in the official plan and has the detail. There are priority that needs to be addressed in here, and we'll get to it later on in more detail, but whether you use an outside consultant to prepare these documents or the county to prepare them on your behalf, there is a significant role for staff at both levels of municipal government. And then when we talk about special projects, we're talking about things like affordable housing strategy or community improvement plans and those kinds of things that aren't mandated. Well, affordable housing now is, but things that are need to be done after you've got your other documents in order. So another area of focus was where we needed to provide clarity was areas where there is shared responsibility. So administrative support is one of those. On matters where the county receives applications and prepares planning reports, the county also prepares the notices and carries those matters forward. But there are other types of notices. There are notices that a councillor may want that are not mandatory, and meetings that are not mandatory. So those things would be done at the local level in terms of organizing those. When it comes to some of the areas of technical support, we heard a lot tonight about transportation. Those are shared areas. GIS data is a shared area where the county consolidates data, but the local municipalities have a very important role in gathering that data. So those matters are addressed to make sure everybody is on the same, has the same basis of information. And you'll hear a lot soon about two-way communication, and this is an area where that becomes important. Another area that came up in the meetings with some of the local municipalities was a request that planners be available to attend at municipal offices. That's not consistent, excuse me, in all municipalities, but it is something that we provided, again, in terms of flexibility. So that is in there. In today's world with technology, that's something that's easier to achieve, but keeps that two-way communication open. And then an area of shared responsibility comes when matters are appealed to the LPAT, because sometimes the lawyer that you have on a file will want information that is outside of what's in the planning report. And sometimes it's outside of the expertise of the planner. So when you have to retain extra consultants, those are a local cost. Having said that, when the county is also a party to the appeal, then those are shared costs that both share accordingly. Communications is one of the areas that I think is the biggest change in terms of what is codified here, rather than what is in the earlier agreements. The earlier agreements are way out of date. They were from 1991 and 1994, and don't reflect what municipalities look like today and the pressures that we face as the provinces fairly frequently changed the legislation and the policies around planning matters. And with the level of development, the need for two-way communication is more and more important. So we've put in requirements that basically says that the county will share information it receives from the province about provincial policy changes or changes under consideration or provincial legislation. The county will also, when it's doing reports on these matters, look for the local perspective so that the matter doesn't reflect just what county staff feels, but it also reflects what local staff feel. And one of the main tools we've proposed, we don't get as granular as this in the MOA, but you currently have a very good system working with CAO Roundtable that meets quite regularly. So that's a location where information can be shared in those ways. Also, when there is an impact that is specific to a local area, that impact will be shared. And opportunities to provide perspective will go both ways on those. So back again to the two-way communication. And finally, because of workload pressures and going back to what we said about priorities and how to handle priorities and make sure there is space to do what needs to be done so that municipalities are not left hanging, sharing of work plans when it comes to these matters becomes very important. Whether you use county resources or whether you hire external consultants, and there's pros and cons of both. The county is still involved to a large extent as a commenting agency. And for you to get the budget to move matters forward, you do that usually the year before. Sometimes it's even longer. As we said, priorities do change. But it gives an opportunity for municipalities to determine if they have a major review, can the county accommodate what it is that they need, so that expectations around timelines can be met. It also gives the county an opportunity to discuss what resources it has. So the sharing of work plans would go both ways in that regard. We also address the area of the cost of county planning services. So right now in the MOU, the only thing that it says is that the county can charge back for the work it does for local municipalities. So in terms of any chargeback, we wanted to make it very clear, because there was some concern that the fees could never exceed the cost to the county of providing the service. The other area that needed to be addressed deals with developer applications and third-party applications of different sorts. And for those, because the county is doing the work on those as the planning department, the county would determine what those fees are. Now, for the local role in carrying out responsibilities related to the planning function, those are still matters that are within the local discretion to charge as you see appropriate. The Municipal Act allows you to charge for fees and services up to 100% cost recovery. So the final matter that is addressed in the MOA, and you have a copy of it, you know it's short, is term. And that's important for a couple of reasons, but we've recommended the term be 5 years. A shorter term doesn't provide stability easily, but it can't go on for decades like the current agreements have. And we're saying that in year 4, it's appropriate to start the review process, because you're a municipality that is being impacted by growth at a rate that you weren't 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And that needs to be accounted for in the agreement. Expectations change over those times, and so do abilities and requirements. And going to that point, there are municipalities that have made it clear that they may want to see change and take some responsibility for planning matters to a local level. So we've said that the agreement could be terminated before its expiry on a minimum of 1 year notice. And the 1 year is provided for because any transfer like that is not easy. It's not something that can be adjusted overnight. There's a lot of information that has to be shared. How it impacts staff at both levels needs to be taken into account. So 1 year allows for the adjustments that are required. So essentially that is the purpose of today's meeting, to review those areas, and we would appreciate any questions or feedback that you have regarding this matter.
Thank you, Mary Ellen and Mark. Are there questions or comments from members of the committee? Don't see any. I'll make a comment myself. I've made it already to you, Mary Ellen, when you spoke at the county. I certainly appreciated your presentation there as well. I am among those who's interested in at least exploring the potential for considering where decisions are made as part of the planning process in Bruce County. The memorandum of agreement in its first paragraph lays out some of those areas that are currently considered areas of county responsibility because they've been delegated to the county through the Planning Act. But there is opportunities for the county to further delegate those responsibilities. The county has delegated some responsibilities to its staff, for example, when it comes to severances and other matters. And it's my view that it's likely possible the county could delegate decision-making authority on some of those, in some of those areas at least, to the lower tiers. And I think that before we sign these agreements, we should have an examination of that potential. Things have changed a lot, as you pointed out, in the last couple of decades since these were signed originally, and that includes how people expect to be engaged and where they expect decisions to be made and how streamlined they expect decision making to be. And I think there's an argument to be made that concentrating more of that decision making closer to where people are could be a good idea. But I certainly wouldn't say that I'm absolutely certain that we should do it at this point, but I would like to see it explored. And I think there's some sense that that's going to happen starting at the county level before this matter comes back to Bruce County Council. And I think that's the right thing. So hopefully we'll see some progress on that, get a sense of what the county's abilities are to delegate some of those authorities and what the appetite is for lower tiers to accept those decision-making responsibilities. I guess bottom line is I'm not eager to rush into signing an agreement until we've had a chance to fully look at some of these other alternatives. We've waited more than 20 years for these renewals, to renew these contracts, and I think the best thing we can do now is take our time and make sure that we get things right when we go to sign again. So that's my thoughts. And the Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I had made some comments for the Bruce County agreement, the next report, but I can't agree. I mean, our director of infrastructure, we've delegated authority to Amanda for plans of subdivision, and I just think that we need to take back some of that, take back some responsibility. And we just have plans of subdivision, plans of condominium, consent, severances. I agree with you. I think that there needs to be more flexibility. I guess the question of the people on the line who made the presentation, thank you for the presentation. I'm just wondering, is this a one shoe fit all in that there may be some municipalities that may be willing to assume more responsibility for planning, and I'm not talking about archaeological and natural heritage. I mean, some of the things probably need to stay at a certain level. But I'm just wondering, with the 8 municipalities with these memorandums of understanding, it's something that can be done by a municipality? And I don't know if this is a Matt question or who wants to answer this, but or is this a memorandum of understanding going to be a one shoe fit all, where once it's designed that, okay, municipalities, you're going to all be treated the same way here, and whereas one municipality wants to take on a little more responsibility, and expanding our settlement area, for example, should we have, as a municipality, who knows our municipality any better than what we do with Jay Posner on staff and planning office right here in town, should be a one shoe fit all or not? So I don't know who wants to answer that question, but is this a memorandum of understanding is going to be the same for all? How's that work?
It will be the same for all. It's contemplated all parties would sign on the same agreement. If you don't sign, you don't sign. But it is also designed, as I said at the outset, as a high level, very flexible agreement so that you pick and choose what services work for you. So if you were looking at a service realignment between the 2 levels of government, you wouldn't need to amend the memorandum of agreement.
So there, I agree with Mayor Charbonneau. I would be hesitant to sign an agreement as is the way it's written. I think there needs to be some negotiation take place. And I mean, I think we're getting a really good deal with planning. I think overall planning do a great job on our behalf, Bruce County. But I just think that, you know, to eliminate some of that red tape, I just think that we could do some of the things that are listed here, and of course the county is always going to be involved to a certain point. But my question was really, is it a one-shoe-fit-all, and once you have it done, you know, that's it. So I think you've answered my question. Thank you.
But to your point about eliminating red tape, one of the reasons why I think the planning was consolidated was to do that kind of a one-stop shop approach, so that you didn't have the duplication. But that's a council decision to make, so council can change that. And Mr. Mayor, you reminded me by your point, a legal opinion was required that will go to county council in December. So,
yeah, thank you for letting us know that. Are there further questions or comments to this information report? I guess or is there a recommendation attached to this one? I don't think so.
It's just
sorry. Yeah, okay. There is a recommendation that council directs staff to continue discussions with the County of Bruce, and that staff returns with the final draft terms of the agreement. Is there anything further? Seeing nothing, then I'll ask all in favor. That is carried. Thank you all very much. Appreciate your time.
thank you.
All right, then that moves us then on to item 4, which is a staff report on source protection plan implementation and an agreement with the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority. And we'll turn it over to the Supervisor of Development Services.
I don't think I have much to add to this one. I guess that it is to me a straightforward renewal. It's a good value for the service. It's actually less costly than it was 5 years ago. A lot of the early work has been completed. The Grey Sauble has identified 4 facilities that require the risk management plans. All of those have the risk management plans now, so it's more of a review, periodically audit, and report type function.
There's a recommendation. I'll read it. We can take any questions if anybody has any. It's recommended that council pass a bylaw to authorize entering into an agreement with the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority to provide the required services for implementation of Municipal Part 4 responsibilities under the Clean Water Act 2006. Are there any questions or comments? I don't see any. All in favor? That's carried. All right, that moves us then on to the final staff report, and that's on the winter operations plan and the director.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to be selfish and take a minute here and just say thank you to Jay and to Colin. And I'm very lucky to be supported by such an intelligent and hardworking staff. And I want all of you to know how much effort goes into all of these things. And this winter operations plan is no different. So I want to thank Trevor and Pete for all the work that they've put into the review of this one. We finally took the time this year to go through this report almost line by line and see what we do and if it's different to how we prioritize our routes and if we needed to change anything this year, especially because of COVID-19. Because we were doing that, we took the time to make sure that everything that we do is properly documented into this report, and I'm happy to say that it is. Our goal is to always provide as a minimum the maintenance standards that are required by the province, but as you all know, because you live in Saugeen Shores, we go way above and beyond that. Things like taking the snow loading off the streets in the downtowns and those things that are appreciated by our residents. So with that, I'd like to bring this report to council to review and approve and provide as direction for us to continue with the winter operations for this coming winter.
Thank you. There is a recommendation. I'll read it and we can take questions. It's recommended that council approves the 2020-2021 winter operations plan. Questions or comments? I'll just make the comment on behalf of Council Amanda. I certainly second all your comments about your staff. Thank you for all of, thank you to them for all of their work. Thank you to you for yours. It's another good winter operations plan. And as you say, our winter operations in Saugeen Shores are really second to none anywhere. And I'm glad to hear that's going to continue for another year in 2020, 2021. So you've heard, Councilor Maya.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I was asleep at the switch there when you opened it up for questions.
No problem.
I'm somewhat disappointed to learn that we're not going to do this trial run with a sidewalk plow other than the, what are they called, the trackless machines. We've all, anybody who's been to some of the larger municipalities or cities, I've seen, and I believe the mayor saw in Ottawa and I saw in Toronto, these smaller $25,000 or $30,000 Kubota units with the heat and cab and radio and doing a fine job keeping the streets clean and salted and that. And I'd hope that we were going to look at these as a cost-effective alternative to the $180,000 trackless machines that we use that don't seem to get a whole lot of use other than pushing snow around in the wintertime. I know they have wonderful capabilities, but so does the mini Kubotas as well. So can we get a commitment that this is not lost in the Christmas wish list, that at some point in the future we may give this an actual try? I know that there are limited supplies, but it doesn't have to be orange Kubota. There's John Deere's, there's Coyotes, there's other manufacturers that make these small tractors that are a fraction of the cost of, and I mean a small fraction of the cost of one of these trackless machines. And I'm a firm believer that they can do the job adequately and save the taxpayers a whole bunch of money on these expensive trackless machines. And I'm yet to be proven wrong. So can we get a commitment that this is not something that's going to be lost in the bin, that we can actually look at this when the availability comes around, and that we don't leave it until the fall of the year to start looking for one, that we can get on it before too late, and see if we can't become more efficient the way, and maybe even take on more sidewalks. Maybe if we add more sidewalks, as Manoj would put it, would be great too, but we could take on more sidewalks if we had a more cost-effective way of doing it. Thank you.
Any comments, the director?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we spent weeks trying to find somebody that would lend us a piece of equipment that we could do a trial, but all the suppliers we contacted said there isn't a machine of that horsepower that you could use in our conditions to make it work. So in order for us, so we're trying the tractor piece that has a pull behind, which would be a cheaper way of making it work. And that's going to cost us $4,000 this year just to buy the attachments to do that. If council wants us to buy a Kubota or the smaller horsepower pieces of equipment, it's going to have to come through a council resolution to purchase the equipment. We just can't get someone to give us a trial.
I saw two of them for sale on Kijiji today. One was from the city of Ottawa, who had a surplus piece of equipment, and one was from the city of Sudbury. And so there are used pieces of equipment out there, Kubotas, both of them were both called sidewalk plows. And if Sudbury can get away with it, I'm pretty sure we can get away with it too.
Well, maybe you guys can speak about that offline, and perhaps there's some opportunities to explore more. I certainly agree with the councillor that it would be nice to see that trial happen. Obviously, we've been discussing expanding sidewalk snow clearing, and that, but the cost is very high, and that's a way to reduce those costs if we could make that work. So certainly, I would encourage the director to explore whatever avenues are possible to carry that trial out. Are there any other questions or comments? I don't hear any, so you've heard the recommendation. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, so we're on to communications, petitions for information. There's 5 items there. Does anybody have any comments to any of them? The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And the Attainable Housing Task Force, I'm going to be doing a thank you to Jay in December when the final report comes to council. He's done a terrific job putting that final report together, the first draft, and you'll see it in a few weeks' time. The Attainable Housing Task Force, the volunteers that have worked on that committee have just done an incredible job, and they need to be thanked. And I'll thank them again in December the 9th. But I just wanted to alert members of the public, the media, council, know that on Wednesday, December the 9th, the members of the public have one more opportunity to have their say about affordable and attainable housing in the town of Saugeen Shores. So write that date down. It's at 1:30 on December the 9th. There will be Zoom meetings hosted by John Van Bastelar and Minnie Jakes, will be the facilitators. And and again at 7 o'clock at night. So there'll be 2 sessions, an hour and a half long, however long it takes. We're inviting members of the public to come in and let us know how they're feeling about housing in this community, and are they hurting and why? What have they been kicked out of their apartment? Why? What are your needs? So we want to hear testimonials that day. We want, so there's a couple opportunities for members of the public to speak up that day. It's your last chance, and then we will take those comments and add them to our first draft of the Housing Task Force recommendations. Pardon me. So encourage people to tune in on December the 9th, and it's a good opportunity to have your say about housing.
Excellent, thank you. Further comments on any of the petitions for information? Oh, Councilor Mahan. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just take the opportunity to draw your attention to the minutes of the September the 23rd Police Services Board. There was a number of items in there, but one item is the new hires. We hired a first-class constable, and we hired 2 special constables, and their names are John Martin, Constable John Martin, Special Constable Cassandra Hahn, and Special Constable Paul Vitez. Were all sworn in on that day. So if you have the opportunity to see any of them around, congratulate them on their appointment and joining of the finest police force in all of Bruce County.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other comments on the petitions? I don't hear any. Why don't we, at this moment, take a 5-minute break? We've been at this for 2 hours. We'll take the break now, and we'll go right into council afterwards. I need a 5-minute break, is what I'm saying. For about 10 minutes now, so I think we'll proceed with the meeting. Hopefully, Councillor Carr comes back in shortly, but let's reconvene. Oh, there he is, Councillor Carr. Good. We will reconvene Committee of the Whole and move on to item 9, reports of department heads. And the first one is an information report on the capital project status updates and the Director of Corporate Services.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. I have provided to you a status update on capital projects for the 3rd quarter ending September 30th. These projects have been identified as either open, closed, or deferred. This report is to identify any projects that could have an impact on the town's finances. At this time, staff do not have any concerns with any of the projects that have been presented to you. The report has identified available funding for each project, and please note that some of these projects could have been approved in a prior period or a prior budget year. I have included in the report in Appendix A the capital projects and the status. At this time, I do not plan on going over each project, but would welcome any questions at this time.
Okay, you have the report. Questions from members of the committee? Councillor Schreider.
Thank you, and through you. Thank you, Sue. I think that looking at this, I think our staff did a tremendous amount of work on the capital end, knowing even and how the effects of COVID has occurred. My question is, I guess we're receiving our capital project or our capital budget shortly. The carry forward or the deferred projects that are going to 2021, has that had an impact on the requested projects that would be presented for council consideration in 2021 so that we're not looking at an overload on staff?
To my knowledge, and I would probably have to defer to some of the other directors because I personally don't have as many capital projects as some of them, but my hope would be that they wouldn't overburden the staff and would have put in the budget knowing they have still to do that, they would be able to do those.
Certainly be a worthwhile question for the capital budget discussion.
Perfect, thank you.
Are there any other comments? Sue, and maybe I could even put this question to the interim CAO. Do you have the sense at this stage that an unusually large number of projects are deferred? I mean, there's always deferred projects. There's always projects that get held over from one year to another. Would you say that this list is unusually large given the circumstances of 2020?
No, I wouldn't say that. What I would say is that some of the projects that we anticipated starting earlier in the spring were delayed in the fall, and therefore have elements of them that are carry over to 2021. Excuse me. There are also a couple of items. I can speak for community services and not necessarily for Amanda, but there are a couple of elements in community services that we've deferred because we recognize after going through the pricing process that it was going to cost somewhat more, and that is reflected in the 2021 budget, and you will see a number of those components when we present in the coming weeks.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, so there's nothing further on that report, then we'll move on to the next one, which is an information report, operating financial results ending September 30th, 2020, and the Director of Corporate Services.
The operating report before you represents the operating financial results as of the end of September 30th. The town is currently reflecting a surplus of $598,400. The major variances that can contribute to this is unbudgeted supplemental revenue of $293,000, labor variances and gapping in positions of $540,000, and this is offset by an increased spending due to COVID-19 of around $146,000. Included in the report is an Appendix A, which shows each departmental summary, and in there I've included significant variances within it. I would also like to remind Council that these figures are unaudited at this time, and due to the cyclical nature of some expenditures, the year-end surplus will be different at the end of the fiscal year than it is right now. And staff cannot determine what the magnitude of that surplus will be, but we are estimating that we will have a surplus by year-end, or hoping to have a surplus.
Okay, thank you. Questions to the Director? The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I know we don't want to get into 2021 budget discussions. I get that, but just a quick question, if you don't mind. It was just about the unbudgeted supplemental income, $283,000. Sue, is this something that staff are going to consider for 2021 budget, to budget a portion of supplemental income as part of our base operations budget, whether it's 100,000 or 200, whatever the amount is, but is something that staff could be considering?
Yes, I can tell you there is a line item for supplemental revenue in the current draft budget.
Okay, thanks.
Excellent. I think I saw Councillor Mayette and I see Councillor Grace.
My question was around supplemental taxation revenue also. And it strikes me that the way it appears on the page, probably different than what I'm perceiving, but it appears as though this came as a surprise that we had so much supplemental revenue, or was there some anticipation that this magnitude of supplemental revenue, and I presume it's the result of MPAC assessment and new, obviously we're adding new tax rolls, seems like weekly, if not daily. So
I wouldn't say it was a surprise, Dave. I can tell you that historically the town has not budgeted for supplemental revenue. In the last few years, it has been significantly higher than in prior years. So this year, we did, in the 2021 budget, you will see a reflection of the revenue. I tend to be conservative on some of the revenues, and I know that the couple of years I've been here, sometimes that revenue that comes in helps offset other spending deficits or expenditures that happen in the year, and then it also flows in at the end of the year to help us in future years as well. So we're trying to find that balance between recording the budget and not overestimating. So we are implementing some budget dollars in 2021.
Sounds like a sound strategy.
Very good. Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Sue, for all the work on these reports. I know that there was a comment in the report about the cost of the cleanup and prep of the waterfront to do with the CCV, the village, Cedar Crescent Village. Could you tell us just briefly, and for the sake of the public who may not have read everything in the report, what that total cost was and what it was for?
So based on my discussions, we have approximately 5,695 of internally staffed wages. So those would have been staff that were redeployed in the spring to help clean up the site. And we had some net out-of-pocket expenses of just over, a little over 9,000. So to dispose of the train station, there was a rental of a wood chipper, and we purchased some grass seed.
And so what was the total amount?
Oh, sorry, I missed that amount. It was $14,736.
Okay, further questions or comments from members? Don't see any, so thank you for that report, Sue. All right, then that moves us down to an information report on Plan the Bruce Agriculture Interim Report and the town's comments, and the Supervisor of Development Services.
Thank you. I'll be brief, but I couldn't help but note that Ms. Bench's outline of the legal nesting of the Planning Act, how the county plan, just sort of working from the bottom, zoning bylaws conform to the lower tier OP, the lower tier OP conforms to the county OP, and so on. I guess I just want to stress that that is merely a notation of the legal requirements, and it shouldn't inform the philosophy of how we plan. And so this report and the next one, I think, are good opportunities for us at the lower tier, and where the so the action is, so to speak, can help lead the county and provide the county with the necessary direction and advice for issues that matter to us. So in the agricultural report, which is the first of many that the county will produce on its own OP review, I've outlined suggestions that I think the county should consider when it's updating its plan on agricultural policies. Without commenting too much on the second report, the housing, I offer, other than it's our own OP review we're talking about, that they can help lead the county as well, because I think they're useful to consider in that regard. But I'll leave it there. You guys can discuss it if you'd like, but they're there for information.
I will say, before I turn it over to council for comments, I appreciate very much you bringing these forward. We are going through at Bruce County once in a generation review of this official plan, several white papers to come on virtually everything to do with planning in the county of Bruce. It's a unique opportunity, certainly unique in my time on council, and that's been several years now, to have any kind, this level of influence over planning in the county. I'm really encouraging Jay to bring each of these reports to this council to give you a chance to look at them. If you have no comments, that's fine. If you do have some comments, I'm certainly keen to hear them. And Jay's got these comments he intends to make, which hopefully you will agree with on our behalf. But I'm eager myself to hear any comments you have as this community's representative on Bruce County Council. So with that, questions or comments from members of the committee? I got the Vice Deputy Mayor and then Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Jay, thanks for your great work again. And two comments under other matters, the end of the report is possible for the ability to readily build more affordable housing units. Good for you. I think that's a really positive statement, and that the county should consider including secondary dwelling units in the rural and agricultural areas. Our Attainable Housing Task Force has talked about that, Jay, as you know, and it is a priority. And I think that we need to really be thinking about that. There's pretty strong opinions around our table that secondary dwelling units in rural agricultural, why just the urban centers? So I think that's a really good point you've raised. And I'm pleased it's in there, Mr. Mayor, and I think it's a good one. And the other thing is, under prime agricultural area mapping, I agree with that statement, Jay. I think, the agricultural zoning to move to the rural designation, I think is positive, particularly for that parcel of land you're talking about west of the Dole-Side Road. I question maybe it should be the west of Carlisle, but I think west of Dole-Side Road is something we should surely be talking about. But I think adding the rural designation, I want to be clear, Jay. I think it could open up some uses, but I'm not quite 100% certain on what those uses are. So if we talk about moving from agriculture to rural designation, could you talk about what that does for our municipality to open up uses for those lands?
Sure. Well, there's really two main parts to the redesignation. One would be it allows for a bit more lot creation, non-farm lot creation. But as I say in the report, this area is already pretty fragmented, and I'm not even sure the potential exists for there very much. The second main matter, which I think is more important, is the opportunity for additional economic development in the rural area, particularly for the natural resources or farm resources on those properties as they exist. The way the county plan is currently set out, in the rural area, you could have commercial and recreational activities that are sort of take advantage of those natural or rural features that you couldn't take advantage of in the agricultural area just because they're meant for intensive agriculture. So for example, in the rural, you could have, the county uses the term country inn as sort of as a tourist accommodation opportunity in the rural location. It's meant for the rural area. Maybe it could be near the river, and it would certainly make sense to put one there potentially if the landowner wanted to. And then secondarily would be for other sort of space extensive uses. I'm sorry if I'm being too technical on a planning term, but something like equipment repair and maintenance. It's just something we don't have large parcels in the urban area to do, and in fact wouldn't be a very efficient use of urban lands, and they maybe are more appropriate in the rural area, and that would just offer another opportunity for additional economic development on those lands.
Okay, thanks, Jay. And Mr. Mayor, I just think this is a really strong point in the report, and I know you've spoken before, we need to protect our agricultural land. I do agree, but for that section of land, that parcel of land that Jay's outlining here, I've spoken to a few residents in that area, in that geographic area, and I think there's a lot of agreement for people in that vicinity, in that parcel of land we're talking about, to expand from agricultural to rural for those extra uses, Jay. So I really appreciate that being in here.
Good, Councilor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Jay. And the county's report is fascinating and very rich. I learned a tremendous amount. But I wanted to ask you a question and also make a comment. First of all, I'll just say I agree with the Vice Deputy Mayor and your report that one of the potential areas that I think is really exciting is the area of agritourism, or, for instance, an example of friends of mine who've done this, and I know that this is something I think you referred to, Jay. People, especially now in COVID times, are out in their RVs, and the fact that some farms are welcoming those people, making space for them to come and use part of their farm area on their trips as a camping site. Not a large one, but a few. I think that there's great potential for that. My question is, you talk about the fact that when you're talking about farm dwelling severances, that the county should examine alternate ways to ensure the process for creating surplus farm dwelling severances and reduce the burden for legitimate applicants. So I think I read somewhere in the report that this bona fide farmer definition is actually unique to Bruce County. It's not a provincial requirement. Is that right?
Yes, certainly the province doesn't make that a requirement in their policy. I'm reading, I double checked this aft. I didn't know this question was coming, but I was looking at other things here, and they don't use that bona fide farmer language anymore. They used to. So it's something that it provides more flexibility to the county if they want to consider. Though that wasn't the reason I was thinking of that comment here. This was in line with something that happened tonight even, is that the county has a current policy that says thou shalt zone the remaining land to prohibit dwellings, and it's just on its own provides an additional requirement that perhaps there's another way. It could, because the PPS itself doesn't require that particular action. It just says approval authorities shall ensure that the retained land can't permit. So maybe is there a different way that doesn't require the expense? Let's look and explore that in more detail.
So just a follow-up question. Is that something that we could depart from the county on if we wanted to make a broader definition of what a legitimate applicant would be?
Well, at this point, we could not. We don't. Our local official plan doesn't cover land outside of our settlement areas, so we'd be having to. What we're doing now is trying to influence the county's policy. We could try to develop one our own and ask the county to insert it. But at this point, I think my preference is to keep the rural urban split the way it is and do what we can to influence them. So if you have a suggestion, let's put it out there for the county to consider.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments, Councillor Mayan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I too had quite a time reading the county report, and a number of items jumped out both in the report and in your synopsis, Jay. A couple of things that caught my eye were new residential lots in woodlots. New residential lots in woodlots, yes. You mentioned that that the existing policy on rural woodlot severances be retained. Could you refresh our memory on what the current policy is on woodlot rural severances are, or building lots in woodlot?
Sure. It's sort of it's a catch-all that the county uses to describe sort of an issue and a concern that or at least a matter that should be discussed, because there was some interest in exploring how woodlots could be developed a little bit. But the county's policy is still mainly the separation of agricultural lands from rural lands. So as it is, you can only sever in woodlots on rural lands. That is, if the woodlots are less than the significant woodland factor, and it's different depending on which part of the county you're in. But nevertheless, if you're in a small woodland, you could sever it if you're on rural lands, not agricultural lands.
All right, and the designation of agricultural lands, I looked at the maps that were provided, and there was one designation that I had never seen before, and that is the potential prime agricultural lands. And one of the areas that was identified as potential prime agricultural lands, I am somewhat extremely familiar with. And I can tell you that the land I own is currently zoned agriculture, but it is far from prime agriculture. In fact, on a number of occasions, I have offered it to farmers, pieces of it for free to farm it. And they have come and looked at it and declined my generous offer. I hadn't gone as far as to pay them to do it, but they didn't want to do it for free. So it's identified as potential future. So I don't know what needs to change to make that prime agricultural land, but clearly it is not in that designation now, and I can't see it. Other than a woodlot, it's a good woodlot.
Well, I mean, again, your comments are probably appreciated for Luke to hear, or the mayor to hear, because the county did conduct what's called a land evaluation and area review. They call it LEAR. It's a reevaluation of how they separate agriculture from rural. It's not a hard line. In other words, that you have some pockets of really poor land in larger pockets of good farmland. That's sort of not the point. The point is, let's try to preserve the agricultural activities in the rural area. My philosophy is a little different than both the LEAR review and the current county policies, but maybe the mayor can enlighten the council more if there's a simple way of doing it.
Nothing simple about this, Jay. It's a complicated process. The LEAR mapping exercise is really came about because of Bruce County's repeated desire to do sort of what the Vice Deputy Mayor and Councillor Grace were talking about in certain areas, to allow for uses that were not agricultural necessarily in areas within agricultural areas, but on land that isn't much use for agriculture. And it's easy for Bruce County councillors and for members of Bruce County staff to see on the ground where a piece of property is not very valuable farmland. It is not very clear when you're painting with the broad brush of the provincial policy statement. And we've come up into conflict there several times with the province because of that. The LEAR mapping is intended to clarify that, for us to find out, as Jay points out, those areas of prime agriculture that really do need preservation, where severances are not desirable, where new houses are not desirable. And then to parse out those areas that are where you'll have potentially prime agriculture areas that might have slightly different rules, where they might be a little bit more flexible in terms of new or different uses, and then rural, where you could have that wedding venue, or that kind of thing. So this is an attempt to clarify things and fix some longstanding issues across the county. Frankly, issues that are a lot more pressing in other municipalities other than our own. We don't have as much problem with this as they do south of us. But I think what we should do, and what Jay has done here, and is identify areas within our municipality where you see on the mapping that what you know on the ground doesn't align with what the leader has found, and identify that and send it up to the county. This is not set in stone yet, so look carefully at those maps, as Jay has done. Look at them. He's made an excellent point about the area to the west of Highway 21, the east of Highway 21. Maybe that it's been identified as potentially prime, maybe it isn't, and the county's willing to look at those things. And we should be encouraging the county we should definitely be encouraging the county to look at those designations that are in close proximity to our settlement areas and make sure that those are appropriate. I think that there are a few examples where if you look around the settlement area where you might say, and that's what Jay has pointed out is a good one, where you might say, maybe that's not exactly what we're looking for right against the settlement area. Maybe these lands could have more broader uses, or maybe they should be zoned as prime agriculture. So anyway, I would encourage you to look carefully at that. I'm glad a few of you have read it. Maybe all of you have read it in detail. It is an interesting report, and keep passing your comments along either to Jay or to me or directly to the county. This is a real important one, so give it some good attention and make whatever comments you think you need to make. If there's nothing further, then we'll move on to the final one, an information report, official plan review, housing and residential growth discussion paper, Supervisor of Development Services.
And I'll try to be brief again. In this particular case, I'm really wanting to stress that I'm excited to keep moving on the OP review. I know it maybe feels very deliberate, a little bit slower than you were expecting, but I think that's by design. I want as much participation, both from our community, from our partners as residents, our agencies, stakeholder groups, businesses. I want as much participation as we can have now, because when we adopt the changes later, or when council adopts them later, there'll be a better understanding, and they'll have that foundational strength to be able to make decisions, knowing why we discussed these and why we took so long to discuss them, because we have a fulsome understanding. And so this first paper on housing, one of our top priorities, it outlines some of the options that are available to the community for inclusion in our OP, some discussion and analysis on the demographics, some suggestions on where there's already strength in our plan, and some areas that we could maybe provide better policies or more clear policies. So again, this is something I'm going to go out to the community over the next month. This was intended for last week, but the same time frame applies. Maybe it'll be extended into the new year a little bit, and then return to council with very close to a draft policy based on the discussion.
Okay, thank you. Comments from members? Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Jay. Jay, I was very happy to see the mention of short-term rentals, studying the effects of short-term rentals on our housing market and available housing, as well as Airbnb, because I think with that, that's a special kind of short-term rental that has, of course, appeared in recent years. And it's not just housing that is diminishing the availability of full-time housing stock. It also has special problems, I think, that I've had a number of complaints about from neighbors of some Airbnb rentals, not all, of course, but some, with issues of noise and parking and some other things that people who are full-time residents in the neighborhood find disruptive. So I'm glad to see that recognized, and I hope we can come up with some recommendations. I know some places that I've read about, some larger cities have taken fairly strong action of regulation of Airbnbs in particular. So it's worth discussing anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments, Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I just echo your comments too, about the importance of these documents, and they are, and it's really shaping the future look of our community. So extremely important documents. And Cheryl, thank you for bringing up about Airbnb. I too am concerned. I've heard similar concerns from neighborhoods about what it's doing to our rental stock, and neighborhood concerns with fairly large groups in Airbnb. And I guess the question I have, Jay, is do we have the ability at all, Jay, to inventory Airbnbs? Do we know how, like, I think in the report I read somewhere, I think we know how many there are. Is there a consistent approach being taken to inventorying Airbnbs? And I guess the other thing is, at some point in time, what, the kind of any restrictions that we need to be placing on Airbnbs. I think they're good to a point, but I think they're having a real, I think there's a negative impact too that they're having in our community in some neighborhoods, and affecting our rental stock and so on and so forth. So do we have an inventory, Jay, or what do we do with that?
Well, I mean, I guess certainly there is a power to license. It's certainly not under the Planning Act, but we enable it through the OP. We express what we want to do with that inventory. And I guess I stress, what do we want to do with that inventory is, like, I don't know if there's a point in collecting information on the Airbnbs unless we're going to do something. And so what is the problem that you think they're creating? Can they be addressed in planning ways? Maybe they need to be addressed in other ways, the noise bylaw, the parking bylaw, whatever. I mean, the discussion is really there for what we want to do with inventory and how to address the problem, and rather than have a one size fits all.
Okay.
I don't like.
I think with some or all of those, I think the parking issues, the numbers of people, and I've witnessed it firsthand, and it's there are some concerns about that. The only other comment I want to make, Mr. Mayor, I think that the chunks that you're bringing this in, the way you're presenting, rather than 500-page report, I like that, Jay. I can swallow that a little bit better, or not swallow it, but digest it a little bit better, rather, in terms of the small chunks that you're bringing in, because you get into those 500-page reports, and with updating an official plan, it's long. So thanks for the way you're presenting it.
Thank you. Further comments? Yeah, Councilor Maya.
Thanks, Jay. And I agree with Vice Deputy Mayor Mike that the bits and pieces, so we can really digest what's in some of these reports, makes it a little easier than trying to go through a tome of information and trying to capture it all in one meeting. Just since we've had a couple of comments about Airbnbs, you can't believe all the hype you hear on the media about Airbnb. I'm somebody who has firsthand experience. I have a facility that was on Airbnb for a couple of years. I'm not currently listed on Airbnb, but not because of any bad experience. The 95% of the guests that we had through Airbnb were totally respectful of the property, totally respectful of the rules. The platform works really well. The company, they back up their hosts really well, and they back up their guests really well. And I don't think we necessarily need to bash Airbnb. It's filling in a niche that was previously filled by small cottage units and proper B&Bs, but if it's done properly, it can be managed. And if it gets out of hand and there's problems that the neighbors see, that's because the hosts aren't doing their job of setting up the rules and enforcing them. So, thanks.
Further comments? I just have a couple of comments, I guess. The one area that has been an area of some contention over the past several years is the intensification target. Discussion from the previous update about whether we should have accepted the 10% intensification target or whether we should have considered something different. This report recommends continuing the 10% intensification target, but I like how it balances that with the recommendation to consider it designating appropriate locations for future intensification. I think that may balance some of the concern with the intensification target that we heard in previous applications, where we can say, you know, these are the parts of the community where a high level of intensification is most appropriate, or perhaps another way to put that is to say, here are the types of intensification which are most appropriate in X part of town, and here are the types of intensification that are most appropriate in Y part of town. I think that would be a useful exercise, and one that would make it very clear to the public what the intensification target means or might mean on the ground, and what could happen in their neighborhood in the future. So I think that's one that will require a little bit more discussion with the public, I think. But I think I do think that the report has an appropriate approach there that goes a little further than we went the last time in fleshing out the intensification target. The other comment that I would make is about some things that I don't see in the report that I wish I did, I guess. I think when it comes to housing, as I've said a few times, we need some more carrots and we need some more sticks. We need to look at inclusionary zoning to compel developers to build affordable housing in our subdivisions as they're approved. And I think that, and when we're talking affordable housing, we're talking apartment buildings where people can rent. That's what we have to have. We need people to build them. And we want developers to develop in the town of Saugeen Shores, and we want them to make a lot of money doing that. But in return, we want them to build this affordable housing. And that has to be a requirement. So I think we have to find a way to do that. But the carrot side of that is we need to give them some leeway to build the things they need to build to give us affordable housing, like taller buildings, for example. I mean, you cannot build an apartment building and have it make sense financially if it has to be 3 stories tall. We have to let them build taller buildings. And we can designate where they can do that, and we can have some control over that. But I think we need to have a discussion as part of all this about how we give developers the flexibility they need in the year 2020 to build the kind of buildings that we need them to build to tackle our affordable housing issue. So, and there may be other things. I know the Vice Deputy Mayor has got an interest in tiny homes, and there's another one, right? I mean, I think there needs to be something in this report that's, when it comes back, that says we are going to examine our planning documents and we're going to amend them, rejig them to give people who want to develop in this community the flexibility they need to build affordable housing. So, those are two things that I would like to see when this comes back, some language around. But I mean, by and large, I think the report's very good, and you've done excellent work as usual. So those are my comments. Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with all of what you just said. And if I could ask a question of Jay, with plans of subdivision, when we talk about apartments, you know, we've got lots of plans of subdivision that call for R1 residential, and we've approved those plans actually. A fair number of them with different construction firms, developers. Can we reopen that, Jay, in terms of the plans of subdivision, where we say, hey, look, we know you've got 250 homes planned for this area, but we want to reopen that plan of subdivision and talk about 50 units that are affordable, attainable. You know, can we reopen those documents, those agreements, Jay?
Excuse me. Just got caught there. All this talk about digestive system, and I've got a cough. I got carrots, I've got sticks here too. So what I I sense from, just to be direct, is we don't specifically have the power. The approval authority does, and currently that's the county. So if you talk about delegation of a power, if that you want to make it a lower tier responsibility, you could do that. So this would be the stick part where you say, we're going to revoke your approval or tighten up your the life of that draft plan from 5 years. We're going to make it expire in a year unless you agree to do certain things. And so those are the types of tools you have now. This discussion paper, it's not as an argument, Mr. Mayor, with you. It doesn't do as clear and direct a job as maybe you'd hoped. But there is some talk about some of the tools we can look at to ensure affordability. And I empathize with you that inclusionary zoning is not that. It's definitely not recommended in here. We don't have the legal authority under the Planning Act, but we have other tools. And one example they give, I think, is we could tie servicing commitment capacity to providing affordable. We could put those conditions, Mike, to the two subdivisions and say, you're not going to get our water and sewer capacity unless you put X number of units that meet whatever range, if it's higher density or if they're built to a certain level of affordability, so on and so forth. We can get very prescriptive if we want to, and that is, in fact, that's the time to do it, is on those draft plans. So I would say we have that ability, or through the county we would, or if we became approval authority we would, and that's excellent content for the review. So when we come back with a policy, we have something to work with.
Yes, and if I can just say, to be more clear, I get that we don't have the power to do inclusionary zoning, and I also get that we don't have the authority just now due to the division of authority between us and the county to do some things. I think even still, we should identify that we need those powers. Identify that we need to have, if the province isn't willing to move fast enough to do this, we are prepared to move. If the county isn't prepared to move, we are prepared to move. And all these things kind of converge, right? Like the conversation we're having with the county about our planning services agreements impacts our ability to do some of these things if we put our foot down. And we can ask the minister for the power to do inclusionary zoning if we think it's something we think it's a power we need. And we identify it in a report, then we can say to the minister, we need that power, and petition him for it, and the minister can give those powers. So I think that we need to do on this one, we need to do a fulsome look at what powers we need, what powers we have, what we want to do, and how we can get there. You have other ideas which are equally valid, Jay, and that you've just articulated, which are good. We need to lay all those things out and say, here's what we want to do, here's where we want to go, here are the powers we need or the incentives we want to be able to give. What do we need to do, to make progress on that? And so, that's what I'd like to report. I know it's just it's an official plan report and not a political document. But I think when it comes to considering our ROP, we need to be more aggressive and say, here are the things we need to do to our OP, and here are the powers we need within our OP to achieve the outcomes we need. That was what I heard around the 10% intensification target thing from the public, was that you should not have just accepted when you were told that the province is going to force you to have a 10% intensification target. You should not have just accepted that was the case. You should have pushed back if you didn't think it was appropriate. And so I've learned that lesson. And I think this council should learn it and say, if a 10%, if the intensification target isn't right for Saugeen Shores, or if the housing authorities within our OP aren't right for Saugeen Shores, what is going to be right? And then let's try and leverage our way into being able to do those things. So those comments for clarity. Are there further comments from anybody else? Doesn't look like it. So thank you for indulging us. Thank you for indulging me, Jay, and have a good evening. Okay, so we're to the end of the committee of the whole agenda. It's 9:30. Shall we dispense with announcements by members this evening? I don't see anybody objecting, so we'll dispense with announcements by members for this evening and move right into regular council. I think we can move directly in. We already had our break, so we'll just do that and wait. Linda's okay to proceed.
There, I think, Mr. Mayor, if everybody's on the council agenda, I think you have the documents before you that you need for the motions, and you may proceed.
Linda? Okay, I'll call to order this. I didn't adjourn the committee of the whole. Can I get a motion to adjourn the committee of the whole? Moved by Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Rich. All in favor? Committee of the whole is adjourned. All right, I'd like to call to order the regular council meeting. And second item is disclosure of pecuniary interest. I'll ask any member if they have one of those they'd like to declare at this time. Seeing none, of course, you can do that anytime if you need to. That moves us on to additions, deletions, and amendments. And there is an amendment. It's a resolution, item 8.2, notice of motion to support SPCA regarding amendments to Bill 229. And there is a resolution that the council agenda be amended to add item 8.2, notice of motion supporting the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority, SPCA, regarding amendments to Bill 229. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Grace, seconded by Maya. Any questions or comments? All in favor? It's carried. All right, then that moves us on to no public meeting. So that moves on to adoption of the minutes. I have a resolution that council adopt the minutes of the planning meeting of August 17, 2020 and the council meeting of November 9, 2020 and note and file the minutes of the committee of the whole meeting of November 9, 2020 as presented. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Smith, second by Schreider. Questions or comments to any of those sets of minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. That moves us then on to reports of the committee of the whole. And the first one is a general government report regarding the transfer of land to Ontario Power. And I have a resolution that the council of the town of Saugeen Shores adopts the general government report dated November 9th, 2020, recommending the council authorize staff to undertake the necessary process to facilitate the transfer of a small parcel of land located at 229 Turner Street to Ontario Power Incorporated. Is there a mover and seconder? By Schreider, seconded by Carr. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? It's carried. And that moves us on to Protective Services Report regarding Cedar Crescent Village proposal. And I have a resolution that Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores adopts a Protective Services Report dated November 9th, 2020, recommending that Council approve in principle the designs attached to the Director of Protective Services Staff Report dated November 9, 2020, regarding Cedar Crescent Village and the preliminary development schedule for the project. Is there a mover and seconder?
Mr. Mayor, before you get to that.
Yeah.
Councillor Smith.
Oh, Councillor Smith.
Yes, I'd like to declare a pecuniary interest as my husband, Ryan Smith, is a partial owner of the Social Athletics of Saugeen Shores.
Okay, thank you. Okay, is there a mover and seconder for the resolution? Moved by Mayette, seconded by Schreider. Questions or comments on the resolution? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. All right, so that moves us then on to reports of municipal officers and committees, and one report, staff report on the ICIP COVID stream local government intake. And there is a resolution. The council supports the application to the ICIP COVID stream local government intake for the North Shore multi-use trail, and that a copy of the application be forwarded to Lisa Thompson, MPP for Huron Bruce. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by the deputy mayor, seconded by Grace. Questions or comments to the resolution? The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, I know it's you know, it's something that's not totally related to this grant application, but I just want to extend a thank you to Amanda. That 60,000. I took a drive down there the other day on North Shore Road, and the $60,000 that Amanda asked for budget for. I mean that's a $200,000 project, I swear. We really stretched that, and Amanda, you did a fabulous job on it. We had that storm just a week ago, that heavy windstorm, and I took a drive by just not long after that, and the way those stones held, it was just very impressive. I know it's not connected with this grant application, but I just I just want to take the opportunity to thank Amanda and Public Works staff. We did a fabulous job on North Shore Road and 60,000. I just want to say that.
Great, thank you. Are there further comments? I'm sorry, Amanda, I saw you come online. Do you have any comments you want to make?
No, I just wanted to be able to answer questions.
Okay. If there's nothing further, then all in favor? That's carried. Okay, then that moves us on to motions and notices of motion. And we have one motion, support of local media, and I'll read it. It's been moved by Councillor Grace, seconded by the Vice Deputy Mayor. Whereas a healthy professional news media is essential for the proper functioning of civil society and democracy at the local, regional, provincial, federal, and international levels. And whereas Public Policy Forum, an independent non-governmental organization dedicated to improving the quality of government in Canada through dialogue among leaders from all sectors of Canadian society, in its 2017 report, The Shattered Mirror, News, Democracy, and Trust in the Digital Age, commissioned by the federal government, concluded that real news is in crisis in Canada, and whereas the U.S. Federal Communications Commission cited 8 critical information needs the media help to provide, including emergencies, other public risks to health, education, the environment, economic opportunities, civic and political knowledge of policy initiatives, and the conduct of public officials and candidates for office, and whereas Canadians have lost the essential services provided by more than 2,000 media workers in 100 communities across Canada due to layoffs, and advertising revenues plunged, prompting an emergency $30 million advertising buy by the federal government. And whereas residents of 190 Canadian communities lost 250 established news outlets due to closings or mergers between 2008 and 2018. And whereas 2/3 of Canadians agree or somewhat agree that because of the COVID-19 outbreak, the federal government should treat widespread media bankruptcies and layoffs as an emergency, according to a Nanos research poll of April 2020, and whereas the federal government allocated nearly $600 million in aid for Canadian media over 5 years in the 2019 budget, and whereas federal government allocated nearly $600 million, that's a repeat of the same line, sorry. Whereas a Statistics Canada survey done in April 2020 found that 51% of respondents relied upon local, national, and international news outlets as a main source of information about COVID-19, while just under 10% cited social media, considering it to be less reliable. And whereas in 2020, at least 14 municipal councils in Ontario, British Columbia, representing more than 1.5 million residents, have already passed resolutions similar to the one proposed below. And whereas the news media in Saugeen Shores have been instrumental before, during the COVID-19 pandemic, ensuring local citizens have accurate information. Therefore, be it resolved that the Town of Saugeen Shores Council recognizes that a healthy professional news media is essential to the proper functioning of democracy in our municipality, urges municipal councils within the region and across Canada to recognize that a robust news media is essential to the proper functioning of democracy in their jurisdictions, endorses legislation and regulations to support and rejuvenate news outlets across Canada, and urges the federal government to move quickly to pass legislation to ensure a supportive environment for healthy news media to serve all Canadians, and that the resolution be forwarded to the area municipalities, local MP and MPPs, and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. Questions or comments to the resolution? Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As this motion describes, local media outlets and thousands of their workers have been lost since 2008, and this has only worsened since the COVID-19 outbreak. This motion recognizes the importance of healthy local media to our community and others, and urges support for this principle throughout our region, the province, and the country. The motion also endorses legislation and regulations to support and strengthen media outlets throughout Canada. As Councillor Smith has already mentioned tonight, Brian Longmire's presentation on the role of our local radio station 98 The Beach in supporting the Hospital Foundation's Light the Way campaign is a wonderful example of the importance of our local media. But we all know that there are daily examples of how vital our local news outlets are in supporting the economic, social, and cultural health of our community. We all remember the tremendous support our local media gave to the Kraft Heinz Lamont Sports Park competition. And there are many daily examples of how our local media provides vital information that benefits our local businesses and organizations. I ask for your support in passing this important resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Further comments to the resolution? Right. Don't see any, so we'll ask all in favor. That's carried. All right, then we'll move on to, we have another one here. I have a resolution here from Vice Deputy Mayor and Councillor Grace that the procedural rules be suspended to waive the notice of this motion to allow debate to occur at the November 23rd, 2020 council meeting. So that's with regard to the SVCA motion, and a resolution to waive notices. And it's been moved by, as I said, the Vice Deputy Mayor and Councillor Grace. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, so we will consider this resolution then. Give me a second to open it up. Okay. Grace and Myatt really like their long resolutions. Bear with me. Whereas members of Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority passed the following resolution on November 20, 2020, and whereas Bill 229, Protect, Support, and Recover from COVID-19 Act, Budget Measures 2020 was introduced on November 5th, 2020, and is expected to be approved by December 10, 2020. Now therefore be resolved, the Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores supports the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority resolution outlined below, and the clerk send copies of this resolution to the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority, the Premier of Ontario, the Ontario Minister of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, and the Ontario Minister of Finance, and MVPs Leslie Thompson and Bill Walker. That is the resolution. Do you require me to read the rest of it? All right, so you've seen the resolution in question and heard the resolution you're being asked to pass. Are there questions or comments from members? Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I did want to, emphasize the importance of this, and I want to thank you for Mayor and Council for placing this on the agenda at such short notice. The changes being proposed to the Conservation Authorities Act are quite alarming, and the Conservation Authority Board last week passed a resolution to strongly oppose the changes. These changes were presented as part of the Conservative government's 2020 Ontario Budget Bill 229 that includes the important Schedule 6. And here's what the amendments, proposed amendments would do. They would grant new powers to the Minister of Natural Resources and Forestry that would allow the Minister to make decisions regarding permit applications and appeals in place of conservation authorities and without nonpartisan technical input and expertise of conservation authority staff. And that's just plain scary, in my view, and that of the Conservation Authority. Bill 229 proposes changes to the Planning Act, which would remove conservation authorities as public bodies under the Act. By doing so, their ability to appear municipal planning decisions or to be party to a planning appeal is lost, and they will no longer be able to participate in negotiated settlements. This resulted in planning decisions that fail to consider hazard risks and for which a conservation authority permits cannot be approved. The changes are calling for municipal councillors to make up the sole membership of the SCVCA board. Board and council members will be instructed to represent the interests of their own municipality only, and not those of the entire Conservation Authority watershed, which is happening now. Sometimes what happens upstream or downstream affects other Conservation Authority partners, and this is concerning. This will lead to very inconsistent Conservation Authority decision-making, and the fear is responsibilities of the Conservation Authority will not be upheld. Bill 229 also proposes the removal of stop work orders. This is an important one. So in other words, the removal of this tool and narrowing of powers of entry curtails the Conservation Authority's ability to enforce regulations under the Conservation Authorities Act that keep human lives, property, and wildlife safe. Not having a stop work order to rely on also diminishes the ability to address environmental violations early in the planning and building process that would allow problems to be remedied before work begins. So basically, by removing a stop work order for the tools available now to the conservation authorities, puts notice on the authority to engage in a time-consuming and costly injunction process to resolve violations. Could end up costing municipalities a lot of money too, Mr. Mayor and Council. The fact that decisions concerning our environment would be made without independent and made independent of scientific information is very concerning. Removing Schedule C from Bill 229 is absolutely necessary as it contains changes to the Conservation Authority Act, which could be detrimental to the future of informed, scientifically based decision-making. With higher water levels on Lake Huron and the implications of climate change continuing to unfold, the contents of Schedule 6 will be dangerous to life and property. Further, we can expect longer timelines for planning related decisions.
So, Mr. Mayor, Bill and Council, Bill 229 is being pushed through the legislative process with very little public consultation. Very concerning. Bill 229 that calls to protect, support, and recover from COVID-19 Act, Schedule 6, was introduced on November the 5th, just November 5th, 2020, and is expected to pass to the House on December the 10th. That's far too fast given the magnitude of changes and the implications on Ontarians and the citizens of Saugeen Shores. Mr. Mayor, Bill 229 lacks transparency. And I really do believe, as do 36 conservation authorities from around the province and numerous municipalities, Ontario Nature, and thousands of Ontario residents, that there will be great financial and environmental risk as a result of these changes. I stated at the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority Board of Directors meeting last week, and Councilor Grace was there on the 20th, that if these changes are approved, and I said this to the group, non-contested, we should talk about these changes, the negative impact in 5 years from now to protection of life, property, and the environment. So let's have this conversation 5 years from now. This one's going to hurt. And anyone on council or conservation authorities that's not taking this serious should be. 70 years of conservation being ultimately erased by a poorly thought out decision. The underlying point, Mr. Mayor, I'll just wind up. The underlying point, members of council, is that in my personal view, that the province is trying to weaken conservation authorities. I would caution any member of any council, conservation authority that supports Bill 229, as it will result in tremendous cost to our planning and permitting processes due to court injunctions, actions as a result of violations. We will pay the price later. We will pay the price later, I'm convinced of it. Stop orders, removing them is dangerous. This is a sad day for the protection of our environmental resources in the province of Ontario. If Schedule 6 is approved, and we need to make our voices heard, Mr. Mayor, and I hope the council supports this resolution. Again, any member of council, any member of conservation authorities around the province of Ontario does not think this is not serious. It is serious. These are big changes that are being proposed by the provincial government, and it's to weaken conservation authorities. And I happen to believe that it's the first step to shutting down conservation authorities. Anyways.
Okay, thank you. I think I saw Councilor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's been my honor to serve as a board member for the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority since January 2019. I have gained great respect for the integrity and dedication of its staff. The Deputy Mayor already talked about the timeline on this, and for the sake of time, I'll only speak to a couple of the points that I raised in Friday's meeting. One of the proposed amendments, which hasn't even been fully described in the legislation, is to restrict what services the authority is able to provide for its member municipalities to what are called core mandated services. Right now, SVCA staff are contracted by member municipalities and Bruce County to provide comments on natural heritage. The idea is that while staff is already studying a property for a planning application, it saves time and money to have the SVCA provide that service instead of hiring special consultants, which would add expense and time to the approval process. Certainly, conservation authorities have offered other services outside their core mandate. For example, education programs in our local schools, supported by corporations like Bruce Power, Enbridge, and now the Nuclear Innovation Institute is working closely with the SVCA's education department, as well as public events intended to raise public awareness and fundraise. I strongly support the education programs, and recently the authority has cut back on outside events, but with provincial funding for conservation authorities cut already by 48.5% since the Conservative government took power, there is pressure to look for fundraising opportunities and raise public awareness. Critics of conservation authorities claim that approvals are difficult and time-consuming, but about 92% of the permit applications received across Ontario conservation authorities received a permit, and only 0.2% of those were appealed. In my time on the board, the SVCA staff has worked diligently to improve their permit processing time. Undoubtedly, there may be some who are annoyed that they cannot build without restriction on property prone to flooding or erosion, but that is for the protection of their personal safety, their investment, and the infrastructure and environment of our municipalities. I won't go through what the Vice Deputy Mayor talked about already in terms of the authorization of the minister to take over an application. But I would say, ironically, for a legislation that is apparently to cut red tape, allowing a decision by the minister who doesn't have the expert, nonpartisan knowledge of Conservation Authority staff may lead to risk to property and personal health and subsequent expensive lawsuits, increased taxpayer expenses, and even longer permit approval times. The lack of transparency surrounding this proposed legislation is troubling. The inclusion of this legislation within an omnibus budget bill being rushed through by mid-December indicates to me that the government wants to avoid true public debate on this issue. I say if you want to make something law, then introduce it on its own and let full public and parliamentary debate take place. Furthermore, including provisions to cripple the conservation authorities in a provincial budget bill is particularly unfair, considering that only small percentages of conservation authority budgets are funded by the province. In the case of the SPCA, only 2% of its almost $4 million budget comes from the province. Let us not forget the reason why the Conservation Authorities Act was established in 1946. It was in response to concerns expressed by agricultural, naturalist, and sports groups who highlighted that much of the renewable natural resources of the province were in an unhealthy state as a result of poor land, water, and forestry practices during the 1930s and 1940s. The combined impacts of drought and deforestation led to extensive soil loss and flooding. 8 years later, in 1954, Hurricane Hazel pounded the Toronto region with winds that reached 110 kilometers an hour and 285 millimeters of rain in 48 hours. Bridges and streets were washed out, homes and trailers were washed into Lake Ontario. Thousands were left homeless and 81 people were killed, 2 of those in Southampton that we pay tribute to in our own Rail Trail Memorial Garden. The total cost of the destruction in Canada was estimated at $100 million in 1954, about $1 billion today. This storm would change the Toronto landscape forever and mobilize the need for managing watersheds on a regional basis. As a result, after Hurricane Hazel, the provincial government amended the Conservation Authorities Act to enable CAs to acquire lands for recreation and conservation purposes and to regulate that land for the safety of the community. Forests and wetlands are protected and more trees are planted to store runoff to reduce flooding. In the last couple of years, I've heard comments from 2 representatives from the insurance industry who are greatly concerned about the impact of flooding. Where fire used to comprise the greatest percentage of property claims, now it is flooding. And they expect this to rise with the effects of climate change, as will the cost of insurance for individuals and governments. With this legislation embedded into an omnibus budget bill to avoid forthright public debate, the provincial government seeks to slash the powers of our conservation authorities. I hope our council will support the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority's resolution. With much of Saugeen Shore's tourism-based economy dependent on sustaining our environmental resources, we have many local reasons to ask the provincial government to revoke Section 6 from the proposed budget bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, could I just have one follow-up? I want to thank you. I want to thank you for sitting in as a viewer to that very important meeting last week. For you as the mayor, I know how busy you are. I didn't know you were on the call at first. The fact that you showed up and viewed was an expression of how important you know how important this is. So I just want to thank you for viewing that meeting.
Sure. Well, as you know, the Conservation Authority is an agency close to my own heart. Are there further questions or comments? I would just say for myself, I know well the Conservation Authority is not a perfect agency. It has issues, but no government agency is perfect, including this one. And we can all do better. And I know there's been a strong dedication at the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority for several years to improve its services, to speed up its response times, just to address those concerns that have been articulated and that both Vice Deputy Mayor and Councillor Grace mentioned. And all that work's been done at the local level. It's been done by local people on boards and on committees, and they've made real strides. And I guess the comment I would make, and the thing that bothers me about this piece of legislation, is that, you know, as Councillor Grace already pointed out, only 2% of the authority's budget is funded by the province. I mean, the rest of it is funded by us, by municipal governments. Our municipal government is the largest single contributor to Saugeen Valley's budget, but there are several others across the watershed, and these decisions should be made locally, as they have been. The improvements to the authority should be driven locally. Changes should be driven locally. It's the opposite of what should happen to drive decision making to Queen's Park. That's always true on in every scenario, whether we're talking conservation authorities or any other service. Local decision making is better, and making decisions at, you know, having the minister decide what should be built from his office at Queen's Park is not the way we want our community planned. Wouldn't serve our community well. So for that fundamental reason, I certainly oppose what's being proposed by the province here. There are a few items in here which may have merit, but what the province is doing it so quickly and not providing opportunities for more discussion doesn't allow us to sort those things out. And I think the Conservation Authority's recommendation, asking for more time and for more discussion about these things before they're implemented, is the right approach. Because as I say, I don't suggest that everything the province is doing here is wrong, but a number of the things are problematic. Some of them absolutely should not be done. And we need to suss those things out and come up with better legislation. And I know Conservation Ontario stands ready to engage with the province anytime on those discussions, and as do municipalities. And we'll come up with better approaches. As I say, it's not a perfect agency, it could be improved, but we need to work on that. And 6 weeks through an omnibus budget bill in the way to do that. So those are my thoughts. Councillor Myatt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for clarity, what the resolution is asking for here is that more time be dedicated to consultation on this bill. It's not against the bill altogether, because some would argue that the pendulum has swung too far in the direction of conservation authorities. You know, the balance of power swings back and forth over the years, and since 1954, you know, the developers and the people who are in the land planning business, some of them would argue, and we've all heard it from people to say, you know, the Saugeen Valley Conservation or the conservation authorities put too many barriers in the way and make us jump through too many hoops unnecessarily. And so there's two sides to this thing, and I know that Vice Deputy Mayor Myatt and Councillor Grace are close to the issue because they're on the board and they work directly with the staff of Saugeen Valley Conservation. And I also don't believe in my heart that the provincial government is trying to take this power so that they can wield it unnecessarily and run amok with proper conservation principles. I don't believe that's the principle behind this, but I also believe that fulsome consultation and a period for all groups to have their say is appropriate, that we should not be ramming through bills that are going to have sweeping changes to the way we've always done business, at least for the past 70 years or so. So my initial idea was that I was going to vote against this because I think that some streamlining of practices and land use planning practices is appropriate at certain times. And the provincial government made that a mandate of theirs when they were elected, to streamline processes for development, appropriate development in the appropriate places. But if what we're asking for is purely to have more time to make sure that there's a fulsome understanding of all of the implications and that all of the parties have their chance to weigh in, I will support this.
Yeah, let me just, for council's clarity, just repeat what the resolution that was passed by the authority and that you're being asked to support asked for. Essentially, it asked the province of Ontario to work with conservation authorities to address their concerns. It asks the province of Ontario to provide a longer transition period. There's a statement that the province respects the conservation authorities and their relationship with municipalities, and that the province embraces their longstanding partnership with conservation authorities and will provide them with the tools and financial resources they need to effectively implement their watershed management role. So that's what it asks for. Essentially, more time, work with us. That's the ask.
Right. Okay. Good.
Is there anything more? I don't see anything, so we'll ask all in favor of the resolution. That's carried. Okay, so then that moves us on to okay, that's the end of the motion. So moves us on to bylaws, and we do have one bylaw. The bylaw 76/2020 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores is hereby read a first, second, and third time and finally passed and sealed this 23rd day of November 2020. Mover and seconder, moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Smith. All in favor? That's carried. And then I have a resolution that this regular council meeting of November 23rd, 2020 hereby adjourns at 9:59 p.m. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Gray, seconded by Schreider. All in favor? That's carried.